Again, but hearing none, we can proceed with the rest of the meeting. I'm sorry to confuse the list here, Jesse. The first person that we should hear from is Dr. Russell D. Dunkel. And that's Dunkel.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to address the Madison Water Utility Board. I'm Dr. Russell Dunkel, and I'm the Wisconsin State Dental Director working in Wisconsin Dental Health Services. I have been a licensed dentist in Wisconsin for over 39 years. Of those, 38 years have been providing direct patient care in clinical practice, including 30 years of teaching at Marquette Dental School, the University of Illinois College of Dentistry in Chicago, and Milwaukee Area Technical College Dental Hygiene Program. In addition, I have been hospital credentialed for 30 years to perform dental treatment in the operating room at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Milwaukee. I have also been responsible for establishing dental facilities in nursing homes and mental health facilities and safety net clinics in southeastern Wisconsin since 1982. I offer my background because over the course of my career, I have provided dental care to a vast diversity of patients, and I have seen the ravages of advanced dental decay and the life-threatening effects of severe intraoral infection. I have seen dental infections in children progress from a small pimple on the side of a tooth to a life-threatening condition within 24 hours. The incredible disheartening concern regarding these facts, along with many others, is that this is a completely treatable disease. It should come as no surprise to anyone that we are dealing with a vast number of social and health inequities both nationally and in Wisconsin, and unfortunately access to dental care is among them. Pre-COVID, Medicaid was both nationally and in Wisconsin the #1 insurer, providing coverage for approximately 25% of the population. There was also a concerted effort pre-COVID by DHS, myself, and many other organizations in the state to reduce the barriers of access to dental care for Medicaid, uninsured, and vulnerable populations who are constantly dealing with the debilitating effects of dental disease. Now with the severe and devastating effects of COVID-19, these gaps in healthcare have widened. Dental offices can no longer practice as we once did pre-COVID, as we must now reduce the number of patients seen in a day, and as a result, will less likely be able to take Medicaid patients and thereby increasing the access to care barriers for the under-resourced and vulnerable populations. On top of this, the employment rate has increased, thereby increasing the number of individuals who need to be on Medicaid. With all these barriers to healthcare, especially for the under-resourced population, now is definitely not the time to remove a proven safe and cost-effective method for reducing dental decay. The mission of the Wisconsin the mission of the Wisconsin Department of Health Services and mine as State Dental Director is first and foremost to protect and promote the health and safety of the people of Wisconsin. That is why, to me, it is unconscionable to even consider removing community water fluoridation at this time when we are dealing with such tremendous issues, including health and social inequities. I implore you not to fall into the trap created by various groups attempting to create fear where none exists, or by simply screaming louder to get their points across. It's like I tell my students and colleagues, fear can be broken down into its own acronym, false evidence appearing real. Please do not further compromise the health and well-being of the citizens of Madison and Wisconsin by removing a proven, safe, and cost-effective means of reducing dental disease and working towards total health for everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Dunkel. Our next speaker is Nicholas Christensen.
There's no person currently on by that name.
Great, thank you. Our next speaker after that is Dipesh Navsaria, and Navsaria.
Hello, thank you. My name is Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. I'm a pediatrician.
You're a little quiet. If you could speak up, everyone could hear you.
Sure. Is that better now?
That's better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. I'm a pediatrician here in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm also the current president of the Wisconsin chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I've worked in federally qualified health centers. I've done primary care work, and I've done outreach visits to tribal populations elsewhere in our state. I also have a degree in public health and regularly teach public health students as well. I'm here to tell you that fluoridation has been named by the CDC as one of the top 10 public health achievements of the last century. I worry what would happen if we were to remove fluoride from our water supply. The issues that I've seen in federally qualified health center populations, as well as tribal populations who are not able to have the benefits of water fluoridation, are significant. Frankly, the most common preoperative sedation clearance that I had to do in primary care was for dental rehabilitation for children who basically had significant numbers of cavities, often due to not having water fluoridation available. One of the concerns that's been brought up has been around brain risks. Certainly, I can tell you that we don't want children to undergo sedation that is unnecessary from a preventable disease. And the prior speaker also spoke about the elements of significant illness, including sepsis and bloodstream infections that can occur secondary to preventable dental disease. I do a lot of work around early brain and child development. I do a lot of work in early literacy and thinking about children's cognitive development. What I can tell you is that fluoride is not the issue here. There's an excellent review that I actually had not seen until it appeared on the agenda from Public Health Madison and Dane County. That is a beautiful review of the literature around fluoride. We can't just look at 1 or 2 or 3 studies and say that's enough. We need to look at the preponderance of what science tells us, and we need to look at the biological plausibility of what these studies tell us. It is very clear from that review and from the studies upon which it rests that we know that fluoride is safe, fluoride prevents significant disease, and that we should continue to use it on a regular basis. This is, as was noted earlier, an equity issue, and that we are spending time at a time like this when science is routinely being questioned around our public society in this pandemic, to have science questioned when there's an enormous body of evidence that states that fluoridation is safe is deeply disturbing and troubling. Please do not let the Madison water supply go the way that other communities have gone due to cost in removing fluoridation, and then the incredible costs, financial and social, that families and children undergo because they no longer have the benefits of water fluoridation. This would be a massive step backwards in our society. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Navsaria. Our next speaker is Robert Kerwin, Kerwin.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak on this important issue. I am a recently retired family physician. I've worked for the last 30 years, including for the IHS, for group health here in Madison, as a rural ER doc out in Sauk, and back here in Madison again. The first thing I would like to clarify is that fluoride is not essential to the body. There are no physiological processes that need it. You do not die or become ill without it. On the contrary, it's a known enzyme disruptor and it interferes with many processes. When it is put in the water, it is used as a medicine, the aim being to reduce cavities at a dose low enough to avoid harm. So what we are doing today is actually a task I performed thousands of times over my career, which is assessing whether to renew a prescription for a patient. In this case, the utility board is doing the prescribing. The patient is the entire population of Madison, the healthy, the sick, the young, the old, those still in the womb. We are deciding whether to continue giving everyone the same medicine, though they may vary greatly in their physiology, health, values, and beliefs. This is the only medicine we use a one-size-fits-all approach, and it's hard to imagine a justification. At a minimum, such a treatment better be well proven to work and have absolutely zero side effects or harms. So nonetheless, our patient's been started on this medicine, so let's do an assessment. We need to consider, do they have the condition it treats? Does it work? How do they tolerate it? Is this the best choice? Are there other options? Has anything changed since we started? It's a lot to think about, and we may be tempted to just go with what the experts say. After all, it's endorsed by many well-known organizations. But when a patient came to me and said the Mayo Clinic prescribed this medicine, a good doctor just doesn't stop there. They want the evidence. They ask questions. They ask for the old records, check it out for themselves. It's critical. I can't tell you how many miraculous recoveries I've witnessed simply by stopping unnecessary meds. When I did the assessment, and I've done this over the last 20 years, reading numerous books, studies, I looked again at the current evidence recently in preparation for this and found the evidence of benefit is not strong. The harms are well documented, but ignored or minimized, and safer alternatives exist. We really don't know how effective it is. There's never been any rigorous studies done. There's never been a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, nothing that would satisfy the FDA today. It's not FDA approved. The early studies have been challenged by critics for years, saying they were rich in fallacies, improper design, and valid use of statistical methods, and so forth. Since the 80s, a series of articles and studies in major publications like Science and Nature have pointed out the prevalence of tooth decay is falling as fast in non-fluoridated cities as in the fluoridated cities. So there's speculation this is because of increased fluoride in the food chain, but others have said, well, this doesn't explain Western Europe where there's hardly any fluoridation. These people feel the main reason are changes in diets and use of topical fluorides. The CDC themselves in 1999 stated the major benefits of fluoride are topical, not systemic. Fluoride toothpaste was not present when water fluoridation began. Now it is nearly universally available. Systematic reviews in 2000, again in 2008, show that the evidence for fluoridated toothpastes reduces decay is stronger than the evidence for swallowing fluoridated water. So to summarize, the reason to give this was stronger 70 years ago when more decay existed, but before the advent of fluoridated toothpaste. The benefits now appear marginal. As far as side effects, in 2006, the National Research Council published a very detailed, heavily documented review. It listed many potential harms, especially the kidneys, thyroid, bones, and brain. So some of the populations at risk then are those with kidney disease, such as those with dialysis or many of the elderly, those with hypothyroidism, immunocompromised, those that are in the womb. And there's obviously been a lot of new research on that. I think one of my colleagues is going to cover that later. Those that drink lots of water, those that have dementia. Fluoride interferes with acetylcholinesterase, and drugs for Alzheimer's mostly work by enhancing the effects of acetylcholinesterase.
Dr. Kerwin, there's a 3-minute limit on your comments, and you've gone a minute over that. Please, I would ask you to close so that we can move on with the rest of our speakers. Dr. Kerwin?
You should have a prompt to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I talk still?
Actually, your time is over. I would ask you to close.
Okay, I just have 4 quick things to say. Our guide should be the current evidence, not endorsements. Water fluoridation has potential for harms. It's wrong to subject vulnerable subpopulations to potential harm in order to provide dubious benefits to different subpopulations. If this were my patient, the prescription for water fluoridation would not be renewed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kerwin. Again, please, for the rest of our speakers, I'd ask you to bear in mind that the limit for talking is 4 minutes. Our next speaker is Diego Calderon.
The limit is 3 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, great. 3 minutes.
There is no person by that name. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to say once again that if you are not logged into Zoom under the name that you are registered on, you need to exit and then return with that name. That way we can properly identify you and you can have your chance to speak.
All right, thank you, Jesse. Our next speaker is Gary Cohen, Cohen.
Hello? Can
Hello.
you hear me now?
Yeah, you're on now.
Okay. I've been a scientist for 50 years. I got my Bachelor of Science degree from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and my PhD from Northwestern University in 1971. I've been studying this issue for many decades now. To me, the science is really clear. Fluoride is a neurotoxin, and it interferes with at least 100 different enzymes in the human body, probably hundreds, because it hasn't been tested on every enzyme in our body. According to the one of the statements from the Water Utility Board, and let me quote here, according to the last paragraph of your policy statement, there is, quote, a continued high prevalence of dental caries in our community. How does this justify 75 years of putting fluoride in the water if you yourself say the results haven't been that good? I don't see how this makes any sense at all. And I have a question for members of the board. I want to know, of those who are going to vote in favor of putting and continuing putting fluoride in the water, how many of you people drink the city's water without removing the fluoride? I want to see if you practice what you teach. You can do that. I hope you do that after I finish my statement. What else? Oh, yes. I had my own experience of having my water fluoridated. Generally, I drink the city water. I have a 3-stage filter, one of which removes the fluoride. Other than that, I wouldn't be drinking the water. The water here actually is high in calcium, magnesium, and strontium, making it really good for teeth and bones. There's no need to put fluoride in the water too. But anyway, I had this fluoride filter. It stopped working after a number of months. I didn't realize it. So I was using it for months, maybe even a year, with the fluoride level in my water getting higher and higher, until I got to the point where my kidneys started to hurt and I lost my short-term memory. I had zero short-term memory. I couldn't remember things from 1 second to another. So I replaced the filter, and over time, I got back my memory fairly good, and my kidneys stopped hurting. Now, I know that correlation is not causation, but there's other reasons for me to believe that, since this never happened before, that it was due to the fluoride in the water. And I'm very careful now to make sure my water filter is working properly. Another question I have is, will this board warn people who are at risk that they should not use the water from Dane County without removing the fluoride? 5 years ago...
Your 3 minutes are up. We have 90 people scheduled to speak today. We need to move along and stick closely to our 3-minute limit. I'll let you close, but I don't want anybody else to go over 3 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead. Okay.
I still would like to have members of the board at some time during this meeting say whether or not they drink the water from Madison or the county without removing the fluoride. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next speaker is Tim Sprengelmeyer, Sprengelmeyer.
All right. I just wanted to say, I'm not an expert on the science of this. However, I find it very immoral for us to be medicating an entire society without their consent. I personally don't want to be consuming this, and I have to go to great lengths to get water to drink because the stuff that comes out of the faucet that I actually pay a bill for every month, I don't feel safe to drink. And in my mind, it doesn't make sense to put that medicine in the same supply of water that I take a shower in, that I flush down the toilet, that I do laundry in. Medicine should be applied intentionally in a dose that your doctor prescribes, not just a same dose for every person and every drip of water that comes out of that faucet is medicated. It just doesn't make sense, and it's highly immoral to be drugging people against their will. I buy toothpaste that does not have fluoride in it, and that's hard to get. Most toothpaste has fluoride, so if it's good for your teeth, buy the toothpaste with fluoride in it. Doesn't make sense to put it in the water. That's all I got.
Chair Diego that you called on earlier is now in under the so if you
that's great. He can go ahead.
All right, excellent.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Dr. Diego Calderon. I'm a veterinarian, microbiologist with more than 20 years of research experience. I have read the research that it has been done in fluoride, and I inviting the member of the board to review this new research. I know it's going to be people in this meeting promoting the fluoridation of the water, but I invite the members of the board to look at the research. I look at it, and it's really concerning what is has been found with the fluoride. I just want you to use the cautionary principle. Just be cautious what we're putting in people's water, especially in the water that kids, expecting mothers and babies are drinking. So please, members of the board, look at the research. This is something we have been done for more than 60 years. I think it's time to review what we have done. Lead was not a problem before. Other chemicals that we used to use are not using now. Chemicals that we thought were safe, they are not safe. So this is happening with the fluoride. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Calderon. Our next speaker is Nicholas Christensen.
There's no person in the meeting by that name.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Jesse. Our next speaker is Brenda Staudenmaier, Staudenmaier.
Hi, thank you for listening to our concerns about water fluoridation today. I've been working in human health and the environment with a focus on drinking water and wastewater since 2016. The past 2 years, I've been operating the local sewerage district. I am a member of AWWA, Wisconsin Rural Association, WWOA, and I'm also a plaintiff in a lawsuit where we are suing the US EPA over the neurotoxicity of artificial fluoride chemicals added to the public drinking water supply. Because we are finding out that fluoride is just as neurotoxic as lead, I am requesting that you rescind your fluoridation support and turn off the dosing pump. At least 16 communities have stopped adding fluoride to their water since 2016, and 5 other utilities in Wisconsin are currently discussing stopping fluoridation. I'm concerned about our local health department's lack of vigilance and their keep on as usual attitude when it comes to neurotoxic fluoride chemicals. The updated health board fluoridation policy that was released on August 21st uses outdated sources as fact to discount studies that came out more recently. For instance, the recently funded NIH studies found children in fluoridated North American communities with the same exposure levels of fluoride that we are currently getting in Madison. These children have significantly lower IQs and higher rates of ADHD. These studies control for lead and arsenic and other important factors. The researchers who worked on these fluoride studies are the same people whose science was used to create our lead standards in the US. Fluoride is as neurotoxic to the brain as lead. Pregnant women and infants should not drink fluoridated Madison water, and they should be warned the same way we are warning with lead. The problem is easy to fix. Turn off the fluoride dosing pumps. Endorsements by organizations that have supported fluoridation since 1950 should not be confused as science. These organizations endorsed fluoride in a time we thought lead paint was good for baby cribs and it was okay to use lead water pipes. Today, we have lots of studies on fluoride demonstrating it damages the brain in a similar manner as lead. It is irresponsible to expose pregnant women and bottle-fed infants to fluoridated water. Most low-income mothers are unable to afford alternative water sources. Fluoride added to drinking water is not necessary to meet drinking water regulations published by the EPA or Wisconsin DNR. It does nothing to improve water quality. Stop adding fluoride to the water. And I want to end with a quote from Erin Brockovich. Don't mess around with fluoride, it's dangerous. Turn it off and never turn it on again. It's not the job of the city to dose any substance in the community drinking water system for the sole purpose of achieving a medical result. If you continue, you're morally corrupt. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Staudenmeier. Our next speaker is Carmen Nightfall, Nightfall.
Carmen, you are unmuted on our end. You should have a prompt asking you to unmute yourself. Again, there should be a prompt, a box that comes up asking you to unmute yourself.
Right now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So to say that fluoridated water is like the best thing for humans since sliced bread, I think is a really inaccurate thing to say. At the same time that the fluoridation of the water supply began, there was sweeping improvements to personal dental hygiene practices, and there was a dissemination of educational programs to the public and in the schools to educate the public on proper dental hygiene. And that has influenced the decrease in dental caries. And so to what degree fluoridation of the water has had a part cannot be, maybe it's had an influence, but you can't say it's solely responsible, and to what degree is undetermined because it has not been studied. I will also mention that the scientific literature, peer-reviewed science, and dentists should know this, is that fluoridated water is not effective on pit and fissure type cavities, which are the most common type of cavity. Fluoride is more effective when it's topically applied and allowed to sit there over time in a concentration, and then you will recall that your dentist makes sure you spits that all out. You're not supposed to swallow it. Rinsing it past our teeth in a diluted amount doesn't really do anything for our teeth, and it does a lot more biochemically inside of our body that has not been studied. We've heard some of these dentist resumes, and you can hear from what they're saying, there's an old dogma, and it's time to thoroughly examine it from multiple facets, not just the cavity standpoint. In regards to the public health policy statement that was recently updated, I agree with the other speaker. It fails to be objective. It's using old data that has counterparts with modern updates. It fails transparency, and it's failing the informed consent to medical treatment of the public paid for by our very own money. I am a health advocate, and that's like a really big thing, and I think there could be a lawsuit coming down the line if that's not addressed. At the very least, fluoridation of all water wells should be immediately suspended until a serious, academically rigorous investigation and deep inquiry and serious objective discussion can take place. There is peer-reviewed research indicating fluoridation of water does more harm than good, especially those with health conditions, those on diuretics, with autoimmune disease, thyroid disorders, chemical sensitivities, kidney disease, those taking a lot of pharmaceuticals, and infants drinking formula, and the elderly. They're all at risk. Silicofluorides is the form of fluoride added to the water supply. It is not the pharmaceutical grade of fluoride that you get at the dentist or in the toothpaste if you opt to buy that. They're unprocessed byproducts of the fertilizer industry, and as such, there are no purification procedures. They can have elevated levels of arsenic that can increase levels of lead in those who have those pipes, as well as contain sulfates, which is high on the list of those with chemical sensitivities. There is no safe dose, and as someone mentioned, the EPA is currently being sued for that, and they are losing. Many of organizations once backing fluoridation are backing out and taking an opposite approach. And if we look at the globe, like most intelligent civilizations are not doing this, and it's not because they have underlying fluoride in their earth contributing to the water.
That's 3 minutes.
Okay, I will wrap it up. In a day and age where we're protecting our at-risk population by wearing masks, we need to protect our at-risk populations by not medicating the water. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nightfall. Our next speaker is Dr. Beth Neary.
Okay, good evening. My name is Dr. Beth Neary. I'm a retired pediatrician. I would consider myself a pretty traditional pediatrician. However, as a scientist, I need to be willing to look critically at new data and be humble enough to look at new information, even if it conflicts with a long-held belief that I've had or a view of many established organizations. 2 significant new papers have come up in the last few years, and they were already mentioned. One was published in JAMA Pediatrics. That is a tough journal to put a paper in. It was done by Dr. Bruce Lampier, and it was highly scrutinized before publication. It's a credible peer-reviewed journal. It has a lot of vigor involved with it. It was a well-designed study. It showed that mothers who drank fluoridated water had male children who decreased their IQ points by 5 points. So Dr. Neary, is that significant? Yes, it is. Because 5 points is what we learned about low levels of lead. And it was the same researcher, Dr. Bruce Lampier, an NIH researcher. He is credible. So when he found that, the CDC in 2012 definitively said there is no safe level of lead. So, but I don't want you to think it's one researcher or 2 researchers, because in 2019, and the Public Health Department erroneously put it in 2018 and misstated this report from the National Toxicology Report. They said that fluoride is a presumed neurotoxin. And what that means is presumed is the highest level that you can get before you go to a clinical trial. And we're never going to do a clinical trial on this information. And the judge in the recent case in California that was mentioned, he actually held the case open because he's waiting for the final NTP report that'll come out this fall. So I'd like to say that we really should wait and see what happens with this NTP report. And I'd like to say that if I had a pregnant mom in front of me, or if my daughter asked me, should I drink fluoridated water, I would tell her no. And I would tell any mom who's making formula for their baby, I would tell them not to use that, because the risk to the brain is far greater than the risk to teeth. And it's also an environmental justice issue. The same children who are exposed to lead could be exposed to fluoride too, and they can't afford to buy bottled water or do a reverse osmosis that other people would do. And I'd like to finally say that I had a discussion with Dr. Henry Anderson, who's on the Madison Water Utility Board Technical Advisory Committee, and he agrees with me that this should be tabled, and we should look at what the National Toxicology Program says this fall, and we should look at it more carefully. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Neary. Our next speaker is Kevin Thomas, THOMAS.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Thomas. Thanks for the opportunity to voice my support for the benefits of optimal communal water fluoridation within the communities of Wisconsin. As background, I was born on the shores of Lake Superior in far northern Wisconsin in the town of Washburn. We own a second home there. I'm talking to you from Florida, where we have a business. We have a second home up on the Big Lake. Thus, we are supporters of the Wisconsin tax base, so I feel obligated to contact you, plus morally right to contact you. When I was young, we moved down to West Bend. My father was grade school principal. My wife and I are both graduates at the UW Eau Claire. I began my career in the dental industry in 1982. In 1997, I purchased an oral care prevention manufacturer that introduced stannous fluoride and unit dose fluoride varnishes to the world. We sold that business to 3M in 2006, and in 2011 started a second oral healthcare company, again focused on the damages of cavities, caries to the public. It is rampant. Over my career, I've been active in access to care issues for our most vulnerable populations. I served as the board chairperson for the Children's Dental Health Project in Washington, D.C. That group is responsible for gaining oral health care coverage in CHIP and the expansion of Medicaid coverage for children and special needs patients. And I was also the first non-dentist to serve on the foundation board of the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, and I'm still on that board, the largest dental foundation, also focused on access to care. The question here is communal water fluoridation safe? The answer is yes. The American Dental Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry all support communal water fluoridation, and those experts are looking at the latest data. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention names water fluoridation as one of the 10 greatest public health achievements in the United States for the 10 years of for the 100 years of the 1990s. Yes, water fluoridation is safe. It is also effective. And for those on the board, you've heard a lot of misinformation and a lot of emotion coming from those who oppose. A lot of statements that could not be backed up, but they're emotional, and I get it, but they were not factual. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Matt Crespin is our next speaker, Crespin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Matt Crespin, and I am a registered dental hygienist and have been for nearly 20 years. I am also currently the Associate Director at Children's Health Alliance of Wisconsin, which is affiliated with Children's Wisconsin, located in Milwaukee, but our organization serves the entire state. I'm here to voice my support for community water fluoridation. The science is very clear that the science does support the continued use of community water fluoridation in not just Madison, but across the country. Fluoridated cities have seen a reduction in decay by up to 25%. So if Madison does indeed decide to stop fluoridating their water, you certainly will see an increase in tooth decay, and it most likely will impact your most vulnerable population, such as low-income children. Evidence shows that for every dollar invested in community water fluoridation, it saves $38 in treatment costs to patients. If we want to look at some recent studies, there was a recent study published in July in the journal of the American Medical Association, which is about pretty recent as it gets, notes that community water fluoridation continues to be associated with reducing severe cavities in 4-year-old children. And in the August online edition of the Journal of the American Medical Association, the study authors noted in a different study that this study extends our understanding of community water fluoridation's benefits for children's oral health, and they suggest that increasing a population's access to fluoridation is associated with decreased caries-related visits and may be associated with the use of dental surgical services within a high-risk population. Endorsements are certainly important. Organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Dental Association, and hundreds of more that support fluoridation across the globe have bodies of experts that review the science before making such a strong endorsement. There are no known reputable organizations that support the elimination of fluoride. What you're hearing is fear, and you're hearing from a very small but vocal group that's using fear, and they're not using science correctly. The studies that are shared to create this fear and doubt are often done in countries where the natural levels of fluoride are significantly higher than what we fluoridate at in the US, or they fluoridate in different ways, such as using salt. No court of last resort has ever ruled that fluoridating water is a form of mass medication or medicating a patient without their consent. I would encourage you to continue your practice of community water fluoridation. This body reviewed the evidence several years ago, and the new and emerging evidence continues to support this safe and effective practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crespin. Our next speaker is Tooka Zokaie, Zokaie.
Hello, can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
My name is Tooka Zokaie. I am a certified public health practitioner with a mission and career built in oral health equity. I currently work for the American Dental Association in disease prevention. I want to start by building common ground. All of us are here today because we want safe, healthy, and thriving community members. We hope all our families have access to drinking water that can nourish their bodies for the sake of public health. We are currently facing a pandemic and are working diligently to address disease prevention. Communities across our nation have transformed themselves to prioritize protection of the health of the public. Dental decay is one such disease that can be prevented with the right interventions. While optimal community water fluoridation alone will not lead to the healthiest mouth, it is one of the most equitable ways of reducing decay at population levels. I want to clarify some things brought up today. Public drinking water is a public health benefit of living in a community. We treat water with chlorines to prevent disease. We built cities a certain way to prevent disease. We're now wearing masks to prevent disease. We add optimal fluoride to prevent disease. Public health is a service, not a prescription. And it is not a medicine, but an adjustment of a naturally occurring mineral. There were fluoride studies mentioned, such as the Green et al. Study in JAMA Peds. I work with the research scientist who was part of that study, and she still supports community water fluoridation. No research shows dosage of fluoride compared to lead leading to the same response. For over 75 years, the research has been clear. Fluoride is safe to ingest at controlled levels of exposure. We continue to call for additional research as methods of testing the side effects of fluoride improve. Every single community member should have protections from an outcome of dental decay that, untreated, could lead to something as awful as death. I strongly support the continuation of this public health practice so we can better protect the health of the populations in our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Zokaie.
Jean, there is one more local speaker, Robbyn Kuester.
We should put our local speakers in at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
So thanks, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesse, please put our local speaker on.
Go ahead,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yes.
My name is Robbyn Kuester, and I'm the Fluoridation Program Coordinator with the Wisconsin Department of Health Services Division of Public Health. I work collaboratively on community water fluoridation with DHS staff, including the state dental director, epidemiologists, and toxicologists. The mission of DHS is to protect and promote the health and safety of the people of Wisconsin. Community water fluoridation is a key component in our efforts to reduce the burden of oral disease. Studies confirm that those living in a community with fluoridated drinking water have about a 25% reduction in cavities over those living in non-fluoridated communities. Water fluoridation is one of the most equitable ways to improve the health of children and adults, regardless of income, insurance status, race or ethnicity, or ability level. In Wisconsin, over 3.5 million people, or almost 90% of the population, living on public water supplies have fluoridated water, and in Dane County, it's over 98%. A review of fluoridation data for Madison clearly demonstrates that this community consistently receives the recommended level of fluoride. The quality of the operations within Madison Water Utility should be commended and recognized. Panels of experts with formal training in various health and scientific disciplines have the capacity to review, interpret, and analyze hundreds of research papers. A number of new studies and reports about fluoride are released each year. Everything presented here today has been reviewed by the experts, and there are no recommendations to adjust current public policy. A cavity is not something to minimize. Left untreated, cavities can cause pain, missed days of school or work, difficulty concentrating, and poor appearance. All of these things cost money and can contribute to a decreased quality of life and ability to succeed in school and work. Fluoride in the water is just one piece of the puzzle for prevention of cavities. Brushing with fluoride toothpaste twice each day is important. So is seeing a dentist regularly. Many people put off appointments to the dentist because they lack dental insurance and can't afford the costs. During this time, community water fluoridation provides crucial added protection against tooth decay. The current evidence has found that the level of fluoride used in community water fluoridation is a safe, effective, and well-tested public health program. DHS, along with the national and international health, service, and professional organizations, supports community water fluoridation based on the overwhelming weight of peer-reviewed, credible scientific evidence. I hope you find this information helpful in making an informed decision regarding community water fluoridation for Madison. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuester. Our next speaker should be Stephen Barrett, MD, B-A-R-R-E-T-T. Jesse, do you have all these names spelled out already? Do you have the same list I do?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay, great. I wasn't sure about that at first. So I'll just say Barrett and
Can I find a person by that name?
Oh, all right. If he's not there, the speaker after that would be Stephen Skonfeld.
There are also no person by that name.
All right. After that, William Bailey.
No William Bailey as well.
Johnny Johnson Jr.
Had you for a second there.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Those last three people that you spoke about absolutely did sign up to speak. I know them, and I'm not certain what's wrong, but maybe I can send them an email after we get off. I am a pediatric dentist. Did my in my research in infant formulas, fluoride concentrations, fluorides in water at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill to get my master's program. I lead up a group that helps right now, helping Green Bay help Green Bay to keep fluoridation in their water when Brenda Stauden and others were working to stop it. That you have heard a wonderful group of people speaking about the studies that have been done over the last 75 years on water fluoridation. And if you pull up PubMed, which PubMed is the rich evidence-based scientific National Library of Medicine, if you put the word fluoridation in there and hit return, you will pull up over 65,000 pieces of literature on fluoridation. If you put in water fluoridation and hit return, you will pull up over 6,600 pieces of research and literature on water fluoridation. For those to tell you here tonight that pulling up the 2 or 3 studies that have been done recently, and I have read all the other literature, listen, it is the overwhelming body of literature on any subject, whether it's building infrastructure, if it's building a bridge. You don't go and say, I want to build a bridge out of straw and mud. You look at what the science of the evidence is in engineering to do that. You look at the overwhelming body of science in this as well. Overwhelming body of evidence over the last 75 years has been that fluoridation is effective and it is safe for everyone. There are no subpopulations that are vulnerable. No one. The people who are most vulnerable are the ones that benefit the most by fluoridation. You will hear people tell that when we started seeing cavity rates come down around the world at the same time, whether they had fluoridation or not, that was when toothpaste with fluoride was introduced. When you looked at those same studies from the World Health Organization, fluoridation reduces cavities by an additional 25%. This is not 75-year-old information. And let me tell you also, please consider, Dr. Lafferty is there as an expert. His policy is being trashed and torn down as being outdated. I reviewed his policy in detail and made comments in an email to you. That policy is outstanding. It has 2020 data in it. It is as up to date as you can get. Yes, have there been a couple of studies or 3 that say something about IQ and fluoride intakes? Yeah. Have those studies studied every single moment from the time the child was conceived until the IQ test was taken at ages 3 to 4? No. There's nobody that can sit here and say that child didn't swallow fluoride toothpaste. Fluoridated toothpaste contains 2,000 times more fluoride.
That's 3 minutes.
What's in your water. Let me just finish, please, finalize and say others have gone way over, and I'm not going to do this. The legal cases that are in front of the judge right now, the anti-fluoridationists have sued 108 times in court, and in no court of last resort have they ever had fluoridation proclaimed illegal. Please do the right thing. Keep it for your families, all of your families. They need it, and we will be more healthy because of it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Again, speakers, please respect other people's time and stay within the 3-minute limit. Our next speaker is Jay Balzer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Jay Balzer. I'm a dentist. I've worked in public health for my entire career, more than 40 years. For a short time in the 80s, I worked on the St. Croix Indian Reservation in Spooner, Wisconsin. So I have a very brief connection to Wisconsin. I'm in favor of fluoridation. Everything I've read, all the people I've come in contact with believe it improves oral health of children and adults. Community water fluoridation is not something concocted by humans. Fluoride is a natural mineral that occurs naturally in waters. It was put there by God or a spirit. It was not put there originally by man. It's a part of the environment. And we found by trial and error that when fluoride was naturally in waters at a certain concentration, it prevented decay, dental decay. And all we've done as public health practitioners is attempted to copy a positive result that we found in nature. I thoroughly disagree with those who call it a medication. It's a mineral that occurs naturally. And when we use fluoride in water, we're merely mimicking what we found in nature. It's similar to when we use penicillin. It's something we found in nature that was beneficial, and we've adopted it to improve the health of humans. I might also comment that people on both sides of this issue are intelligent and they're well-meaning. And we can go around and around citing specific studies that prove this or prove that. I think we have to look at what we call the preponderance of evidence, when we look at the majority of studies over many years, where does the evidence point? We can't just change a policy that has been in force since 1948 in Madison because someone pops up with a study, a single study or two studies that seem to show an effect of fluoridation on IQ.
That's 3 minutes.
Yes, thanks. I might also just end by saying Madison has been fluoridated since 1948.
So our Dr. Balzer is gone over his time. Our next speaker is Lynn Short.
There's no person by that name.
All right. After Lynn Short, it's Kurt Ferre.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Dr. Kurt Ferre. I'm a retired dentist from Portland, Oregon, a city that I've called home for 40 years. I'm particularly fond of your state as my late in-laws met at the University of Wisconsin after the Second World War and gifted me a cheesehead daughter who became my future wife and a pediatrician. I became an advocate for public health and fluoridation in the early 2000s when I did my first volunteer dental care, where I had to extract a severely abscessed and broken down 6-year molar on a 9-year-old boy, who later told me he couldn't remember how long the tooth had been hurting him. Later, I was reflecting on this encounter and in particular about this young man. He didn't choose who his parents are or what social economic class he was born into, but what was the figurative brick between my eyes that my own 2 daughters, whose mother was a pediatrician and their father a dentist, would never, ever have to experience this kind of dental pain. Over the past 20 years, I've observed 3 facts of fluoridation politics. It's much easier to scare the public than to unscare them. Now, 2, while the support of fluoridation is mile wide, sadly, the passion runs an inch deep. In contrast, the opposition support against fluoridation is a relative inch wide, but their passion runs to the center of the earth. It's no different with the anti-vaxxers. And 3, while it can be extremely difficult to overcome the fear tactics of the opponents and bring fluoridation to a non-fluoridated community, it can be equally difficult for the opponents to stop an existing fluoridation program in a long-standing fluoridated community. Indeed, since the fall of 2010, my colleague Dr. Chuck Haney and I have prevented opponents of fluoridation from ending fluoridation programs in 16 cities, 10 in Oregon. Some of them were directly involved the Fluoride Action Network, who has mounted several attacks on fluoridation schemes in Wisconsin, including this one in Madison. Would like to leave you with one thought. No one can know everything about all things, and where we go for our information is critically important. Are you going to believe the Fluoride Action Network, whose sole goal is to end fluoridation worldwide? Or are you going to listen to your state and local public health, medical, and dental experts who have looked at these IQ studies, understand their weaknesses, and continue to support this important public health measure? Do not make the mistake of Juneau, Alaska, and Calgary, Alberta, that ended their fluoridation programs only to see the rate of oral disease, pain, and suffering increase in their children. Oral health equity is health equity. And in this time of COVID, health equity for so many in your fine city and around the country has been challenged. Please, please continue your fluoridation program. Thank you for hearing my statement.
Thanks, Dr. Ferre. Our next speaker is Samuel Zwetchk.
Yes, hello. My name's Sam Zwetchk. I bring you greetings from the state of Rhode Island, where I serve as the state dental director. We took our vacation in Madison a couple years ago. We had a fantastic time. We ate at Essen House. We had drinks on the terrace. We visited Taliesin, much more. We loved it. My girlfriend got her PhD at University of Wisconsin in sociology. She's now department chair at a local university. She grew up in Cranston, Rhode Island, which has been fluoridated like most of Rhode Island since the 1950s. She drank a lot of tap water growing up. So did all of her siblings. Nobody drank bottled water back then. They all did very well. One teaches oboe in Texas. Another is involved in security. One is a teacher. Another works for Microsoft. They're smart people. My siblings and I, we all grew up drinking tap water here in Providence, and we're doing fine too, with no complaints about our IQ or our brain function. I'm a dentist. My brother is a physician. Another brother is a lawyer. My sister works in the computer industry. We did all right, and I think we can actually attribute much of our success to the fact that we rarely miss school, and we never miss school for a dental problem. So we know that there are smart people coming out of areas that are fluoridated. I worked for a number of years as the dentist at a Job Corps in New Jersey. You've got Job Corps in Milwaukee, I think. These are residential job training sites for low-income young adults. Students came from both New York City, which has had consistent, safe, and effective fluoridation for many years, and New Jersey, which has the second lowest rate of fluoridation of the states. I did a dental exam for every new student, and when they opened their mouth, I could tell where they were from just by looking at their teeth. They didn't have to tell me. The young people from cities like Camden, Newark, and Patterson, they all had decay. Now, fluoride doesn't fully protect teeth. You still have to drink it, and especially you can't drink sugar-sweetened soda, but consistently the students from New Jersey had worse teeth. Here in Rhode Island, when we look at our Medicaid claims data comparing two communities, Newport, which is fluoridated, and Westerly, which is non-fluoridated, on average, the children from Westerly needed over $30 worth of dental treatment more than those in Newport. So in summary, you are all fortunate to live in such a wonderful city. You're all fortunate to have fluoride in the water because it is safe and effective. I know a lot of very smart people who grew up with fluoride. Fluoridation is an example of a public health measure in that it helps improve health with minimal effort. It works equitably, and it is available to all to benefit, no matter their education or socioeconomic status. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Zwetchk. Next, Dr. Harry Goodman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, well, thanks very much. And I'm here to support community water fluoridation. I am the former Maryland State Dental Director who was in that position for well over 20 years. Maryland is a state where we had a 12-year-old child die from basically from dental caries in a molar. And I cannot tell you the ravages that we went through and the drama that we went through in trying to deal with that situation. And I pray that Madison, Wisconsin does not have to deal with that if it fortunately decides to take fluoride out of the water. I have been supportive of community water fluoridation my whole career, but I'm retired now and I don't have anything really on the line here except to do the right thing. And when I was state dental director, the one thing I always said is, if the science and data said otherwise, I would recommend to my health officer to take fluoride out of the water. But it so far hasn't. And all the prior speakers who are supporting water fluoridation have attested to the 75 years of research and in recent years also of the support that water fluoridation is safe and it certainly is effective. And so this is why I am here today. But I'm also here to talk to you just as a parent. I have two teenage boys, and I know parents have a lot of things to worry about, but but I'm pleased to tell you that the decades of research have demonstrated that water fluoridation is not one of my worries. I want my kids to do the right thing. I want them to wear masks. I want them to save distance. I want them not to go to bars. And I also want them to drink fluoridated water when it's available. It's been discussed already how fluoride exists naturally. And that's what this really is. It's all about just adding a small amount of fluoride to protect teeth from tooth decay. And as I said, it can cause illness. It can cause, and in very extreme situations, death. And it's just preventable and it's avoidable. And that's what made it so tragic for all of us in Maryland. It's there basically to strengthen the enamel of the teeth. It's a natural substance. It's akin to adding iodine to salt. Is akin to adding vitamin D to milk. It's the same thing. There's nothing different. We've been at this now for 75 years. How much longer can we continue to debate this? It's been the most studied element in probably the history of all elements, and that's saying a lot. So in summation, I just want to say that it is one of the only, if not the only, public health measure that's voted on. It's a community choice. And after nearly 70 years of experience and research, we know that fluoridation is a smart choice for reducing tooth decay. So please, I beg you, continue to provide this great preventive measure to support oral health and more importantly, for all ages, overall health. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Our next speaker is Charles C. Haney.
There's no person with that name on the meeting.
All right, we'll go to the next speaker. Merlin Omer.
There's also that person also is not in the meeting.
The next speaker is Juliette Guichon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for taking my call from Calgary, Alberta. As a graduate of Yale, Oxford, and the University of Toronto with training in law, I've learned that experts know their area of expertise and they stay within it. Fluoridation experts have already advised you. These experts work within Wisconsin Public Health and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. These experts read and evaluate peer-reviewed articles when published. They are up to date and have the responsibility to advise you correctly. I might ask you, why are you being opportuned by people who are engaging, in effect, in an attack on public health during a pandemic? Why are non-experts in fluoridation and public health presuming to tell you the state of the science? Would you tolerate such an amateur hour in the context of the safety of your bridges? I venture to suggest that if such an attack happened, you would ask your in-house experts in engineering of the science of bridges and the National Society of Professional Engineers, if you were in any doubt, for advice about the safety of your bridges. Why is this happening? In Canada, my country, 5.6% of our population, according to Statistics Canada, has been diagnosed with paranoia. If the same proportion obtains in medicine, then about 14,000 people have such a diagnosis. People with paranoia are likely to oppose water additives, but such people are entitled to preventive health measures, as are their children and all children. You likely have many questions. You've heard many claims in this call. Please put all your questions about the science to your experts. These public health experts have the answers for you, and significantly, they have the legal responsibility to advise you correctly. Based on these experts' advice, you will have performed the required due diligence to continue to provide the vital public health measure of fluoridation to the residents of Madison. Please, I beg you, do not follow the very sad example of Calgary, Alberta, where the level of crying in dental offices has reached the point where it's very difficult for dentists to go to work and to do their job. Such has been the increase in dental decay. Please continue water fluoridation for your residents of Madison, especially the children and the seniors who are most at risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Guichon. Our next speaker is Linda Casta.
Hi, it's Casti. Thank you. And I was hoping that actually you would be able to pronounce my name Casti, because the Castis live across the state of Wisconsin. My father's family has been there for multiple generations, and today as a dentist, PhD epidemiologist, and diplomat in of the American Board in Dental Public Health, I want to advocate and support for on behalf of water fluoridation as a natural means to help the state and your community have equity in helping to combat the very untoward effects of dental caries, to really help with prevention and severity. So my cousins live in farms and small towns. They live around Alma and Buffalo City, in Cream, Fountain City, Galesville, all the way up to Asheville. And that I know that they are in dire need of all the assistance that they can get, and that they really value their children and good oral health for their children, and that is, as been stated, it's evidence-based. It is the appropriate thing to do to continue it, and that your citizens of your state need you to support that. And I'm currently in the neighboring state of Illinois, at the University of Illinois at Chicago as a professor, and did work as a senior staff fellow at NIH on issues surrounding this for monitoring the severity and prevalence of dental caries. And we still have a lot of work to do. This is something that's controllable and would allow us to focus on other aspects of health if we would continue and improve our coverage for prevention of dental caries. And this is such a strong means. It feels criminal not to continue it. And again, on behalf of my family, I really wish, as been said, that you evaluate and respect all the work that's been done on behalf of these issues and maintain water fluoridation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Casti. Our next speaker is Jennifer Meyer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. For the record, my name is Jennifer Meyer. I'm a professor at the University of Alaska Anchorage, and I've been teaching health sciences for over 10 years. I hold a doctoral degree in public health, a master's in public health, and I've been a registered nurse for over 20 years. And I, again, thank you for the opportunity to advocate for child health and voice my continued support for community water fluoridation programs. I realize I have only 2 minutes, so I'll be very clear and frank. I ask you to please not follow in the footsteps of Juneau and Fairbanks, Alaska, where we failed to protect children and families from the profiteers of anti-fluoride misinformation and pseudoscience. I published a study, which I'd be happy to submit to the council, looking at the impact of fluoridation cessation for children between the ages of 0 and 18. eligible for Medicaid residing in Juneau, Alaska. And, very quickly, it results in a clear pattern that those with less exposure to community water fluoridation experience more caries-related procedures and in turn more restoration costs. And those details are outlined in the paper. I think it's important to recognize that study was done under relatively modern conditions, so with widely available fluoridated toothpaste and access to dental services. So I was listening to much of the testimony previously, and what concerns me is many of the common talking points that one hears on the anti-fluoride websites and those organizations. And again, I request that you take your guidance from experts, your local experts. Many of them have provided testimony today. I heard a lot of reference to the JAMA Pediatrics study that came out, I want to say, in October of last year. And I was one of 30 scientists from 6 different countries that submitted a letter of concern to the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, describing serious methodological flaws in that study and other studies from that work group. I'd be happy to submit that to the council as well if they're interested. I heard reference to the National Toxicology Program draft monograph. I think it's important to remember that that was evaluated and rejected by the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. I'd be happy to forward that document to you as well. So particularly, I want to remind all of you to try to remember what Paul Offit said. He said it best, and I'll just close with this. Pseudoscience is not a victimless crime, and I call on the council to please don't fail to protect children. Community water fluoridation is a safe and effective public health intervention, and it is equity oriented and protects the entire population. We all deserve a chance to have good oral health, and I'll just close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Our next speaker is Allison Bianchi.
There's no person in this meeting by that name.
Okay. The next speaker after that is Ifetayo Johnson.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Ifetayo Johnson. I'm Executive Director with the Oral Health Progress and Equity Network, or OPEN as it's called. We're a network of 2,600 members across all the United States. And we're very concerned about making sure that fluoridation is available. Let me begin by saying fluoride is not a medicine. It is a naturally occurring mineral that is available in almost all water sources. Water is considered fluoridated when a public water system adjusts the fluoride to a level that is optimal for preventing tooth decay, either by lowering the amount of fluoride in the water or by increasing it to just 0.7 parts per million, just enough to protect our teeth. We have been decreasing, because of fluoride, we've decreased the number of Americans who have had cavities continually over the last 4 decades. In fact, as it's become more prevalent, as fluoridation has become more available across America, the average number of decayed, filled, or missing teeth among 12-year-olds fell 68% between 1966 and 1994. Roughly 74% of Americans are connected now to public water that is fluoridated. And we have not had the kind of problems, I think, that some of the other callers have brought up. Most of those are really urban myths or suburban myths. We're at a time right now where we're going through a pandemic. And while a lot of the callers may have access to good dental care and their children may be able to get sealants. We also have 100 million Americans that lack dental insurance, and fluoridation offers an easy, inexpensive preventative strategy that everyone can benefit from by simply turning on their tap. We are looking at a disease. Cavities actually are the most prevalent chronic disease in both children and adults. For children, it's 5 times more common than asthma. It's 4 times more common than childhood obesity. It's 20 times more common than diabetes. And that's after having 4 decades of decreasing levels of cavities. It's still that high. This is also a good use of the city's dollars. It helps your bottom line. For every dollar you invest in fluoridation, you're going to prevent $38 to $45 in unnecessary treatment costs. There have been over 3,000 studies done on fluoridation and fluoride, and 2 facts are clear: that Americans have been drinking fluoridated water for 70 years now, and there's an overwhelming evidence showing that it's both safe and effective. One of the folks asked why they have both fluoridation and toothpaste. The same reason.
That's 3 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Our next speaker is is Lawrence Grayhills.
Greetings, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lawrence Grayhills, and I'm a private practitioner, a dentist, former public health dentist, and national spokesperson for the Academy of General Dentistry. And I'd just like to say, and I also say that I grew up in Fond du Lac and Ripon. So Wisconsin is very near and dear to my heart. But I want to say that fluoride has had 70 years of proven laboratory and evidence-based research results showing that it's effective in preventing and controlling dental caries. And so many of the people that have come on before me have demonstrated this, and they're all experts in the field, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But I just want to say that fluoridated drinking water has been heralded as one of the greatest public health measures ever undertaken to eliminate a disease process, second only to the polio vaccine. And the Academy of General Dentistry's stance for the inclusion of fluoride in drinking water is supported by so many public health agencies, including the Center for Disease Control, National Institute of Dental Research, the American Pediatric Dental Association, the Surgeon General of the United States, and the list goes on and on and on. So I ask you not to believe junk science, but to look at 70 years of proven research and results. And I've seen it myself in my practice, and I urge you to maintain community water fluoridation. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Dr. Grayhills. Our next speaker is Patrick Tepe.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Tepe. I'm actually a local dentist. I'm not sure why I didn't get into the local section, but that's okay. It's been interesting hearing especially a number of the really wonderful folks from around our country who recognize the value here. But I'm a general dentist with Associated Dentists. We have an office in Madison, and my particular location is in Verona, although I have hundreds of patients that live in Southwest Madison and South Madison. I also am the immediate past president of the Wisconsin Dental Association, and I certainly can speak on the WDA's behalf because we support the City of Madison continuing water fluoridation, but I speak more so as a local dentist. You all have received some wonderful background information. The City County Public Health document is fantastic and so well written and factual. I'm not going to speak a lot to the effectiveness, the safety, because you've heard from so many other people, and with the limited time, I want to focus on a few things. Unfortunately, we're in a time where social media drives so many people's knowledge. And I want to focus in on the research. I know many of you as board members, maybe all of you have received some studies that are relatively quite recent that are being lauded as changed or new information. And I want to point out a few things, because just because there's a study doesn't make that study credible, for one. And although I certainly can't ask all of you to be experts in what's a good study or a bad study, what is good and quality science versus junk science, that's our job, is to do that. And please let us do that. And I'm happy to try to stay on as long as I can. If any of you locally board members have questions, I'm happy to assist as a local dentist. But also to focus in on that there are some key factors when you look at a science, at a study, that what makes that credible. And you need to look at the number of participants in the study. You need to look at whether that study is controlled, and whether that study has been reproduced as well. So I'm not sure where I am on the time, and I'm not sure if you're open for any questions, but I want to focus to debunk one study that the folks that are against fluoride that really seem to want to hang their hat on, and that's the study that's comparing IQ reduction. And it just goes to show how a study can focus in on selective data kind of to their advantage. And they comment about, and there was a pediatrician that kind of brought this up as well, that, that boys have a 5-point reduced IQ. That's actually not true from the study. If you read into it, the actual point that's listed in the study is less than 2 points. But more importantly, talking about selective information, what they fail to point out is that same study actually shows that girls of the same age in the same study actually had higher IQ points.
Thank you, Dr. T, but you're over your time. The next speaker is Jessica Nielsen. Again, please stay within your 3-minute time allotment. We have on the order of 90 speakers today. Jessica Nielsen.
There's no one by that name.
Christian, I'm sorry, Jessica Nelson. Christian Nelson at the same address.
Nope, there's no person by that name.
Okay. Monica Roberts.
No person by that name.
Dixie Ann Parker.
No person by that name.
Julie Beckman.
Julie, you could unmute yourself by pressing *6. Let's try that again. Julie, if you can press *6, you should be able to unmute yourself and start speaking.
So she's there, Jesse, but she can't get on.
Looks like it just needs to unmute by pressing *6.
Boy, if she's unable to get on the line, we should go on to our next speaker. So she still isn't able to get on?
Let me toggle this one more time. Julie, can you give that one more shot?
Oh, looks like that worked.
Did it work? Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, yay. Okay. Sorry about that. I am currently at a senior parent meeting at my daughter's high school, and I was in the middle of a gym. So here we go. So I'm Julie Beckman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of community water fluoridation. I have been in the public health field for nearly 20 years, and this community water fluoridation is something that's very important to me. I'm also a mom to two beautiful, healthy, intelligent young adults who have consumed fluoridated water for their whole lives. My son had his first cavity at the age of 19 years old, and my daughter has yet to have one, and she is nearly 18 years old. I've grown up knowing community water fluoridation is safe and effective. My mom has touted it for years, saying how lucky I was that I was growing up in a community with water fluoridation and even toothpaste with fluoride in it. The optimal amount of fluoride in drinking water is 0.7 parts per million. This is the equivalent of 1 penny in $14,000. Over 100 national and international health organizations such as ADA, CDC, the WHO, American Academy of Pediatrics, are just to name a few. I hope your city continues to fluoridate the water, and thank you again for this opportunity. Bye.
Thank you, Ms. Beckman. Our next speaker is Marilyn Marsh.
There's no person by that name.
Our next speaker is Sandra Sutton.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Sandy Sutton. I'm a mom and a grandmother. I'm a registered dental hygienist in Michigan, but I'm also an educator and a proud member of the American Water Works Association Michigan and the Michigan Rural Water Association, both of which strongly support community water fluoridation here. I do educate water operators to the function and safety of community water fluoridation, and I also have the opportunity to assist with the 3rd grade and the senior citizens oral health surveillance programs here. When I look into these people's mouths, I can tell who has grown up in fluoridated and non-fluoridated areas. It's quite sad. Now, many systems do have optimal natural levels and others supplement. We can see it around our state, right up through our Upper Peninsula, going right into Wisconsin. So there are natural levels there. I grew up in an area where the natural level of fluoride in our water was a little on the higher side. It was 1.2 parts per million, which is still quite small. Now, there were none of the health issues that many claim to be associated with fluoridated water or with naturally fluoridated water. It's the same thing. There are over 300 community systems here in Michigan that are naturally fluoridated that are at or near optimal levels. Now, the NSF has approved fluoride supplement for its purity. Now, when it hits water, a fluoride ion is a fluoride ion is a fluoride ion. You cannot tell the difference between what is added to the water as a supplement and what is naturally there. I did want to complete a sentence here for Mrs. Ipateo Johnson, though. We do have fluoridated water and fluoridated toothpaste for the same reason that we have brakes, airbags, and seat belts in our cars. It's for protection. It all goes to the good of our health and for our bodies, for our residents. Now, cutting back with the cutbacks in jobs and job losses due to COVID, please don't take away your residents' oral health benefits and their safety net. This helps children, adults, seniors, everyone across the spectrum. I strongly suggest that you continue to support supplementing fluoride in your water there in Wisconsin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. Our next speaker is James Smith.
Couldn't get it out.
There's no person by that name.
Our next speaker is Rachel White.
There's a new speaker by that name.
John Snyder.
No person by that name.
All right. Carrie Harbison.
No person by that name.
Lindy Ballin.
Could you say that name again?
Lindy Ballin, B-O-L-L-E-N.
No person by that name.
John Dane.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me start off by saying, no, I am not related to Nathan Dane, for which Dane County is named after. But I am a dentist. I have been practicing for over 40 years. And since 2016, I have been the state dental director for Missouri. We've heard a lot about the impact of fluoride on various things such as the IQ and other things. I want to mention to you a little bit about the impact on families. I was blessed to have 3 children in my family, and we grew up in a fluoridated community. I'm sure those of you on the committee have children and grandchildren. Have you been to the dentist lately? The average filling price for a single surface tooth-colored filling is about $155. Now, if you're so lucky as to have dental insurance that covers 80% of that, that's not that bad. But we do have a lot of people in our communities that do not have the benefit of dental insurance and may not even have the benefit of Medicaid. So you have 3 kids. It's widely accepted from both pro and con that if you turn off the fluoride, you'll have somewhere between 1 and 2 new cavities per person per year. So let's think about my family. I take my 3 kids into the dentist who no longer have fluoridated water. That's $465 that I was not planning on spending that year. Of course, I've got a relatively nice income, so it wouldn't be that terrible. But let's consider some of these folks that are on unemployment right now due to the pandemic. That's a major hit. Let's look at the community as a whole. And for the sake of argument, let's say that Madison has 250,000 people. It could be a little more, it could be a little less. And let's say half of those people are children. If you spend $155 per child in Madison, that comes up to nearly $220 million. That goes into the pockets of your local dentists who I'm sure would be very happy to have that. But that's $20 million that those families can't spend on rent, groceries, medical care, paying their water bill, paying their utility bills. Think of that when you consider the fact that you're going to reduce or eliminate the fluoride in your community, and what happens to that. Oh, by the way, that $20 million that goes to the dentist is not subject to sales tax. So it might even have an impact on your budget. So thank you again for listening to me. Consider the impact on your families as you consider reducing or eliminating fluoride in your water system, and support community water fluoridation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dane. The next speaker is Dion Snitker.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear me first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of water fluoridation. I just want you to know I support water fluoridation for the following reasons. I'm a mom and a grandmother. I believe water fluoridation prevents tooth decay. I believe that water fluoridation protects all ages from cavities, including those insured and uninsured. And I believe water fluoridation saves dental costs to those of us who either have or don't have insurance. I grew up on a farm with well water. I suffered greatly from tooth aches and cavities growing up because I did not have fluoridated water. My two sons, after I got married, my two sons, from ages, from newborn until they were about 8 years old, did not have fluoridated water. They were on well waters as well. And believe me, I love my well water. It tastes great. But they didn't have fluoridated water. And we took them to the dentist regularly. There was one point when our oldest son, at age 6, had 6 to 7 cavities one summer. We literally had to chase him down in the parking lot of the dentist office to get him to sit in the chair. And so that's heartbreaking to a mother. And I don't want any kids to go through that. A year after that, we moved to Denver, Colorado. And I can tell you from personal experience, from the time we moved to Denver, where they fluoridate their water, the cavities were reduced significantly in our family. And so that's my testimony to what a great thing water fluoridation is. And I hope that for your community, you can continue fluoridating your water. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Snitker. Our next speaker is Sarbjeet Singh.
This person is registered, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions.
Oh, great. The next speaker is Dr. Dean Murphy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm a practicing dentist for over 30 years, and fluoride was the #1 prescription that I was writing in my practice until a mother challenged me. I started researching the topic then on my own. One side I found said that it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the other side said it was a deadly cumulative poison, and they both couldn't have been right. So I kept digging. I was a faculty member at U of I Medical School, and so I had access to libraries all across the United States, and I spent 15 years doing my own research, and I ended up writing a book. It is a poison. It's ranked between arsenic and strychnine. It's a fact. It accumulates in our bodies. As we age, it builds up. The book itself is called The Devil's Poison, and it was nicknamed that back in the 1500s because they knew it was there, but they couldn't They couldn't isolate it. It wasn't until Henry Moissan isolated it around the turn of the century, late 1800s. Those little white marks that are on the teeth are caused by fluoride. That's not debatable. It's from a disturbance in actually the collagen framework of the enamel when it's being laid down. The minerals that subsequently are supposed to replace that collagen are not able to adhere to those bonding sites, and you end up with hypocalcifications. It's a weaker structure. It's weaker enamel. It's due to the toxic effects of fluoride on the mitochondria of these ameloblasts. It's actually poisoning the power centers in these cells. What else is being made from birth to age 8, which is when the enamel is supposed to be being laid down for most permanent teeth? It's your nervous system, your bones, and your brain and organs. There are now over 65 studies showing a lowered IQ from exposure to fluoride levels. There's no magic bullet when you drink it. It doesn't go just to the teeth. It goes everywhere, and it concentrates, especially in bones. Like the bone marrow and the hips are the most. It weakens the teeth by 40 to 60%, and it weakens the bones as we age. Bone study has shown 60% higher fluoride concentration in cities that are fluoridated, 60% higher. And from age to 13 to 50, fluoride increases an average in those tenfold. We are brushing our teeth 2 to 4 times a day with a fluoride concentration in toothpaste of 1,500 to over 4,500 parts per million is sodium fluoride. And here we are talking about drinking 0.7. Under the age of 8, they tend to consume half of what they brush. That's why the poison labeling is on the tube of toothpaste. Once it's in the water, it gets into food processing, and it concentrates in the food like it does in our bodies. Give you an idea, refined sugar is 13 parts per million, baking powder, 19 to 200 parts per million, Jell-O, 130 to 160 parts per million. Coke Classic is over almost 3 parts per million. Grape juice for kids, almost 7 parts per million. Our own government, another branch of the government, U.S. Department of Agriculture, made the statement, fluorine and fluorides have caused more damage to domestic animals worldwide than any other air pollutant.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Your time is up. Again, please stay within the 3-minute guideline. We have a lot of speakers. A lot of people feel strongly about this. Dr. James Sanders.
There's no person by that name.
Thomas Van Someren.
No person by that name.
Thomas Hennessy.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm calling from Anchorage, Alaska. I'm a public health physician and epidemiologist that worked for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for 25 years. I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up on fluoridated water, and I trained at the Mayo Clinic. I hope you won't hold my Minnesota background against me. But I've long admired the state of Wisconsin public health system, the medical expertise you hold there, and am envious as an Alaskan of the high proportion of the state of Wisconsin that enjoys community water fluoridation and the benefits that has for the children, in particular, the children's teeth in your state. In Alaska, where we have struggled to provide simple necessities such as running water in many Alaska Native communities, dental caries is a rampant problem. We're well over 90% of children showing caries. But the few communities that do provide water fluoridation in rural Alaska make a big difference in the health of their children's teeth. The dentists that I work with say you can look in a child's mouth in Alaska and know right away if they came from a community that has water fluoridation. In 2007, our state capital, Juneau, discontinued water fluoridation. They were scared by anti-fluoride activists. They didn't have a strong local health department to support them, and they discontinued water fluoridation. Studies done 5 years later showed that children's teeth suffered, and there were higher dental caries rates in children born after water fluoridation was discontinued, and the rates of caries-associated treatments and the cost to the state of Alaska went up remarkably. And unfortunately, that example in Juneau was followed by other cities in our state that, again, did not have strong local health departments and discontinued water fluoridation after being scared by many of the people who spoke earlier today. So I urge you in Wisconsin to hold the line, do what is right, follow your health experts. What you're providing is a social good that provides health equity for the children in your city. You've been doing it for a long time. You're doing the right thing. Listen to the experts and trust that they are providing you the information. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Hennessy. Our next speaker is Melanie Simmer-Beck.
There's no person by that name.
Dana Lucona.
No person by that name.
Susie Teams Heflin.
No person by that name.
Kristen Dayton.
No person by that name.
Maggie Davis.
No person by that name.
Cliff Davis.
No person by that name.
Jennifer Martinson.
No person by that name.
Orrin Dayton.
No person by that name.
Carol Kopf.
Go ahead, Carol.
Hi, my name is Carol Kopf, and I come from Levittown, New York. As a young mother of two, I spearheaded the effort that stopped fluoridation in Levittown in 1983, where I live, on Long Island, New York. I've since earned a BS in biology and a master's in science and environmental reporting from NYU. I've studied this issue steadily since then. It's my only issue. I once thought I was lucky to have fluoride in the water until I was forced to research the issue for a journalism class. Neither I nor the other speakers opposed to fluoridation are emotion-based. We are science-based, and we aren't spreading fear, but sharing the truth. Most, if not all of us, are volunteers. While waiting, I did what Dr. Johnson recommended. I plugged fluoride into PubMed, and yes, 65,000 pieces of fluoride citations did pop up, but most of them have nothing to do with dental treatments, and none of them prove safety. It took 75 years before surgeons would believe published science showing that washing hands prevents death during surgery. Incubators were a sideshow at Coney Island before doctors embraced them. And the smoking cancer link took 50 years to emerge from dusty science journals to popular acceptance. The literature is screaming right now that ingesting fluoride is not necessary or safe for everyone. Dentists simply haven't caught up to modern science, and they are driving the debate. When you know better, you do better. You should protect Madison residents now by stopping artificial water fluoridation. And by the way, the Juneau study outlined by Dr. Meyer has been proven scientifically invalid. All of Long Island is not fluoridated, 3 million people, yet we have some of the lowest cavity rates in the state, that's otherwise 72% fluoridated, including our neighbors in New York City, which is 100% fluoridated since 65. In 2008, Poughkeepsie stopped fluoridation because health departments couldn't provide evidence that fluoridation chemicals were safe. Yet tooth decay rates declined steadily for 3 years after that. Even New York's capital city, Albany, isn't fluoridated. Department of Health statistics show no correlation between fluoridation and tooth decay rates of New York State counties. there is a correlation between low income and more cavities. The simple truth is that rotten diets make rotten teeth, and no amount of fluoride changes that. Those living in poverty are generally more malnourished and bear the burden of many diet-related diseases, including tooth decay. No child is fluoride deficient. Too many are dentist deficient. The experiment upon which fluoridation safety is based started in 1945 when Newburgh, New York added sodium fluoride into the water supply to see if school children would get sick. They did, but that's ignored. Because of political pressure, the experiment was declared a success after 5 years, before the teeth of those born into the experiment had erupted. Anyone sick 2 weeks prior to exam were excluded, thereby missing those children who may have been sickened by fluoride. Cancer, brain, long-term effects, adults and toddlers were not studied. 10 years later, 1955.
That's 3 minutes. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Kopf. Our next speaker is Denise Kokoram. Again, keep your comments to within 3 minutes.
There's no person by that name.
L'Oreal Rosen.
Also, no person by that name.
Lisette Suknick.
No person by that name.
Oh, okay. I'd like to ask for a brief break at this time. Do we need a motion for that, Amy? I'd ask the members of the board, is there a motion for us to take a brief break before we continue hearing the rest of the people that want to speak?
So moved. It's Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. Is there a second? Thank you, Marcia. The motion has been moved and seconded. I'll take a vote.
How long will the recess be?
5 minutes.
Okay.
A 5-minute recess. If nobody has any objection, we'll just take it. We'll assume that the motion is passed, and we'll take a 5-minute break.
Deb Simon. Mike Daly.
Still awake.
All right. Patrick Delmore. Jean McClin.
Here.
Alder Marcia Rummel.
Present.
Deborah Simon. I called that out of order earlier.
Present.
Doug Vagley.
Present.
Okay, there is a quorum present.
Great. Do I need a motion to get us back into session, or great, will our recess is over? We're back in session. Orrin Dayton, who was on our list before, is now on the line and able to speak to us. Go ahead, Jesse.
Okay, Orrin, you are unmuted and there you go.
Hey, this is his wife. I believe he just wanted to listen in, and he is in support of community water fluoridation.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker, L'Oreal Rosen.
No person by that name.
Lizette Zucknick.
No person by that name.
Hugh Wunderlich.
No person by that name.
Michael Kirsch.
No person by that name.
Dr. Scott Tomar.
No person by that name.
Kelsey Bullness.
No person by that name.
Rudy Liddell.
No person by that name.
John Paul.
No person by that name.
Mark Koikan.
No person by that name.
Robbyn Katzman.
No person by that name.
Craig Oldham.
No person by that name.
Christy Johnson.
No person by that name.
Linda Jorgensen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Linda Jorgensen. I'm a dental hygienist. I'm speaking on behalf of the Wisconsin Dental Hygienists Association in support for the continuation of community water fluoridation in Madison. In my 50-year career in dental hygiene, I have practiced dental hygiene in general and pediatric practices. I taught dental hygiene at a community college. And now I'm serving as a volunteer community water fluoridation specialist and spokesperson for the association. I urge you, we as the Dental Hygienists Association in Wisconsin urge you to continue fluoridating your water. Discontinuing of water fluoridation would be taking something of great value away from your citizens and would add nothing to their quality of life or health. In fact, it would not be protecting them from harm, as has been suggested by anti-fluoride activists. It would be increasing the risk of your citizens suffering dental decay. Tooth decay is unsightly, painful, expensive, and it can and does cause a great deal of suffering and even death when it goes untreated. At a time when many citizens of Wisconsin are having difficulty accessing affordable dental services, to end water fluoridation in Madison would result in even more suffering and not less. That's the bad news. Excuse me. The good news is that fluoridated water remains a relatively simple, wide-reaching, and cost-effective method of reducing tooth decay over a person's lifetime. In fact, it has been named one of the top 10 public health achievements in the 20th century. While there are many other ways to reduce tooth decay, can't deny that, nothing is as broadly effective as water fluoridation for a population. As dental hygienists, our primary purpose is to prevent oral diseases. We utilize many methods in doing so, and for decades, the crown jewel in preventing tooth decay has been water fluoridation. When we're successful in our endeavors, we know we are improving the health of the entire community. We will happily teach our patients how to avoid excessive fluoride from toothpaste, mouthwashes, and professionally applied treatments, but we also support community water fluoridation for those who don't have access to dentists and hygienists to help them. So that's my primary remarks. I just want to say also that dentists and hygienists pledge to follow a code of ethics that includes reviewing current scientific literature and applying what we find there. So it's I've heard again and again that we're not keeping up with the science, and I would like to reassure you that we definitely do. Thanks for listening to my testimony.
Thanks, Ms. Jorgensen. Our next speaker is Gary Lease.
No person by that name.
Mary Kruskos.
No person by that name.
Christopher Nadell.
You are unmuted on our end. You should have a prompt up asking you to unmute yourself. Once again, Christopher, you are unmuted on our end. There should be a little pop-up prompt. You can select to unmute yourself. Chair, maybe we should come back.
Oh, all right. We'll just keep on moving, and Christopher can speak if he is able to get on later. The next speaker is Michael Connett.
This is Chris. I don't know if I'm still...
Yep, we can hear you now.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was having some trouble there. All right, sorry, let me pull up my notes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board. Good evening now. My name is Chris Nidell, and I am a scientist, and I'm also an environmental attorney that's working on the litigation that involves fluoride and the EPA. Contrary to some of the pro-fluoride comments, I do believe wholeheartedly in science. I worked for years in the pharmaceutical industry, and my wife is currently working on a COVID vaccine. I also believe in vaccines. However, two scientific issues that I wanted to quickly address that are discussed in the August policy statement, particularly for the purpose of avoiding what was so-called false evidence appearing real. We also heard that fluoride is a lot like penicillin, but penicillin you don't get without a prescription. It is not like vitamin D or iodine. Both of these are essential nutrients. With respect to the policy statement, on the issue of dental fluorosis, the policy statement blatantly misrepresents the health significance of fluorosis and the CDC's position on moderate and severe fluorosis. The reference cited does not say that all forms of fluorosis are merely cosmetic, rather that only the mild form is referred to as cosmetic. The National Academies of Science makes it clear that severe pitting and breaking of teeth, as well as the increased porosity of tooth enamel associated with moderate to severe fluorosis, are in fact serious dental health issues and lead actually to greater cavities. With respect to the issue of IQ, the discussion of IQ in that same policy document glosses over the fact that there have been something more than the cross-sectional studies that are referenced, but rather there have been 2 prospective cohort studies, both of which do support the finding that fluoridation at the levels currently done in the United States has an impact up to 5 IQ points on, at least on the male children. And I want to point out that fluoride is not the only toxicant that has a gender-based effect. There are other environmental toxicants that impact development in the womb that have a male or a female sex-based effect. And I'm guessing now that my time is close to up, so I'll go ahead and stop with that.
Thank you, Mr. Nadell. Our next speaker is Michael Connett.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Michael Connett, and I am the lead attorney in the case against the EPA dealing with fluoridation and the risk to the developing brain. And I'll just make a few comments here about the case and what we've learned. First, it was mentioned earlier that fluoride is, quote, the most studied element in the history of all elements. But in this case, we asked the EPA, the Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control, and the manufacturers of fluoridation chemicals. We asked each and every one of them under oath for safety data that would support the safety of fluoridation on the brain. And none of those organizations could present any safety data. So when we're dealing with this question of fluoride in the brain and in the risks to the developing brain, keep in mind that they never studied this in the past. This was not an issue when they were studying this back in the 1940s and 1950s. And the data that we have today is almost entirely consistent in showing a risk. And in this case, we called the scientists who have been funded by the National Institutes of Health to study the impact of low-level fluoride on IQ and ADHD, Dr. Bruce Lanphier and Dr. Howard Hu. They testified in this case. And they testified that their findings from these NIH-funded studies are consistent with the findings on lead and IQ. They're finding effects of fluoride on IQ that are consistent with the effects of lead on IQ. These are scientists whose research on lead has shaped national policy and national regulations. They are true experts. They're not fake experts, I think was implied earlier. Just briefly, Dr. Zwetchk, I think from Rhode Island, mentioned that his family grew up in a place that had fluoridated water, and they turned out just fine. They're intelligent, smart people. Well, the fact of the matter is I'm assuming Dr. Zwetchkenbaum's family also grew up at a time when we were adding lead to gasoline. But the fact that they were healthy and didn't have any problems doesn't mean that leaded gasoline was safe. We know that leaded gasoline caused substantial harm to millions of people. And so so we need to be careful about dealing with anecdotal data. Lastly, there was a reference to a 12-year-old who had died in Maryland from a toothache or an abscessed tooth. His name was DeMonte Driver. He was 12 years old. What was not mentioned earlier was that DeMonte Driver lived in a fluoridated community. So the notion that fluoridation chemicals in water is going to prevent that kind of severe tooth decay is not supported by the data. So again, we asked, in terms of fluoridation, I would just encourage the board to consider the new studies funded by the National Institutes of Health that have been published subsequent to 2017. They are showing significant and large effects, and I know I've gone over my time.
Thank you, Mr. Conant. Next, Rick North.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. My name's Rick North. I'm retired now. My previous career is in nonprofit health management. I worked 21 years for the American Cancer Society. Last 5 as director of the Oregon division, and also 7 years for Physicians for Social Responsibility. I'm not a doctor. I've just worked with doctors and dentists and scientists all my life, and I still do. And I'm here opposing water fluoridation. I used to support it because the government and organizations like the Dental Association said it was good. And then once I actually looked at the science instead of the endorsements, I found out differently very quickly. A couple of points to mention. A lot of people have brought up, this has been called one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century. What they're not saying is that fluoridation is the only one out of the 10 that has not been widely adopted. It is, in fact, one of the most widely rejected health interventions in the world. Out of 196 countries, only 24 have any fluoridation at all. Europe, 4 out of 48 countries fluoridate. Countries like France, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Sweden have all prohibited fluoridation. They've all prohibited. They will not allow it. And for the countries that don't, the cities, hundreds of thousands of cities on their own have decided they don't want it. There was a comment that no known reputable organization supported the removal of fluoridation. I'm just going to read a few of you organizations that are opposed to fluoridation. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine, Center for Health, Environment, and Justice, the Environmental Working Group, Food and Water Watch, the Institute of Neurotoxicology and Neurological Disorders, the Organic Consumers Association, International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, the League of United Latin American Citizens, the oldest and largest Hispanic advocacy group in the country, all opposed. I think they take exception to being told that they're not reputable. And then there are these organizations that once supported fluoridation that have pulled back. They're not taking a position against it yet, but they have pulled back from endorsing it. And they include the Alzheimer's Association, the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, the Center for Science in the Public Interest, Consumers Union, publisher of Consumers Reports, the National Down Syndrome Congress, the National Down Syndrome Society, the National Kidney Foundation. As the science keeps coming in against fluoridation, more and more organizations are dropping their endorsement. Please, I'm a grandfather, I'm a father, and I can tell you, my kids and my grandkids make sure they do not drink fluoridated water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. North. Our next speaker is Kimberly Smith.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. And I want to give a really big thank you to Marcia for bringing this topic to light. It's not always easy. As you can see, there are a lot of people who have an opinion on things. So again, thank you, Marcia. So I think the people who are trying to instill fear are the people who are proponents for fluoride. And, you're hearing them talk about all this pain, the dying. And I would just like to tell you my story. I am a lifelong resident of Dane County, spent most of my years in Madison, the Madison area. And I am a Black woman. And I have numerous amounts of white marks, that fluorosis that a few of the dentists have talked about. And for me, that means that my teeth are brittle. To get that done, to get that taken care of, that's $3,000, maybe more. And so there's no savings on my part when it comes to, when we're talking dollars about fluoride. And honestly, the CDC says that fluoride is better. Well, the mechanism of action is actually topical. So I'm not sure why we're consuming fluoride internally. And when it comes to informed consent, you were hearing these nurses not nurses, but the dental hygienists talk about code of ethics. You're breaking informed consent. For informed consent, the person needs to know the nature of the procedure, the risks and benefits of the procedure, reasonable alternatives, risks and benefits of the alternatives, and assessment of the patient's understanding of elements 1 through 4, which are those 4 reasons. So that is not done. I've never signed on to being treated, a mass treatment. Neither has my family. And I think that you should keep this on the table. Don't let it stop here. Move it forward. Review all those scientific studies. Because, a few years ago, my doctor prescribed me a high blood pressure medication. Turns out I didn't have a high blood pressure medication. And it was me. I took myself off of it because it was making me sick. And I want to take myself off of something that is making me sick, and that's fluoride. I have spent already thousands of dollars repairing my teeth with caps, crowns. I had fillings. If you want to help kids, stop with the silver fillings. They're killing us. My teeth are destroyed from trying to cut corners. And we need to come to a middle ground. And for shame, people coming in here from Calgary and Alaska, this is Madison. We will deal with Madison issues, okay? I mean, I don't like forced medication and not being able to opt out of it. And to opt out of it, I have to pay a high cost. My husband and I are looking to buy a filter for $200 plus the maintenance on that. I would just like to be able to drink safe water. I don't know. That's it. I thank you again, Marcia. This is a huge issue, and I appreciate your bravery in even addressing this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Our next speaker is Rachel Henkin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of community water fluoridation. My name is Rachel Henkin, and I manage the Wisconsin Oral Health Coalition at Children's Health Alliance of Wisconsin. With more than 200 members, the Wisconsin Oral Health Coalition is comprised of healthcare providers, dentists, dental hygienists, educators, advocacy and provider organizations, state and local entities, and community members. We work together to address oral health access issues and work to improve oral health for all residents statewide. Community water fluoridation is a safe, cost-effective health measure for preventing tooth decay. Community water fluoridation saves families money that would otherwise pay for more frequent fillings and other dental treatments. Communities that fluoridate their water across the country have an average of 25% less dental disease compared to those that do not. We hope that you will listen to the medical, dental, and public health experts on this issue and continue this important practice in your community. Ending this effective program would be a detriment to the community and a step backwards in the area of prevention. I also want to note that in 2004 and in 2016, the coalition unanimously adopted policy priority statements to help determine support and guide policy development. The policy priority statements include a policy specific to maintaining or increasing the percentage of Wisconsin residents with access to optimally fluoridated water through public water systems. We work whenever a community is thinking of discontinuing community water fluoridation, and the coalition tries to get involved in that community and educate policymakers and decision makers on the benefits of community water fluoridation. So in light of the oral health benefits and support from leading health organizations, please support community water fluoridation by maintaining the Madison's Community Water Fluoridation Program. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Henkin. Our next speaker is Janine Cornelius.
Yeah.
There's no person by that name.
Clayton Finley.
No person by that name.
And does that get through all of our speakers? But are there any more that came in, Amy?
There are. Dr. John Bailey.
There we go. Dr. Bailey. Jesse, he doesn't look like he's muted.
Nope, he's not muted. Maybe muted on your microphone.
I see your name on the telephone as well. Click *6 to unmute.
Okay, we have both John Baileys unmuted on our end.
I could go to the next person and come back to John Bailey.
Yeah. Please do, Amy.
Okay. Frederick Grassen.
No person by that name.
Chris Neurath.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Chris Neurath. I'm the Research Director of the American Environmental Health Studies Project. This week, I've been attending the annual conference of the International Association of Environmental Epidemiology. There will be a session devoted exclusively to studies of fluoride neurotoxicity, as there have been for the past 2 years. The science showing that fluoride is a developmental neurotoxin is rapidly emerging, and most proponents of water fluoridation have either not looked at the evidence themselves or have attempted to discount it because it threatens their long-stated claims that water fluoridation is perfectly safe for everyone. I've carefully reviewed the many studies, and the number is now up to 185 human studies and over 300 animal studies. The vast majority of these have found adverse neurological effects. Most of the human studies have found lowered IQ in children, and some are now looking at ADHD and finding increased risk. Importantly, the strongest studies to date, which have been funded by the U.S. National Institutes of Health, have found lowered IQ from exposure to artificially fluoridated water like you have in Madison. So this is not a side effect of fluoride that only occurs at very high doses. But don't take my word for it. I would like to quote the editors of the Journal of the American Medical Association in comments they made about a paper they published a year ago that has received more attention than almost any other paper published in their journal. Quote, Dr. Rivara, a 1 milligram per liter increase in the maternal urinary fluoride concentration was associated with a 5-point lower score on the boy's IQ. Dr. Christakis, right, an effect size which is sizable on a par with lead. Rivara, right, it is. The effect size is really quite large. That's a real concern. The results are really startling. So if mothers now come into their doctor's offices and ask the pediatrician what to do, what are you going to say? Christakis, I think I would advise them to drink bottled water or filtered water. Ravara, yeah, the other thing is that some people may not be able to afford bottled water. It could be a financial burden to some low income, and we need to think about that as well. I hope you, as lay people, but who are in a position to directly affect the health of thousands of people in Madison, will consider the advice of these experts. When they first received the study, they were incredulous and assumed it must be flawed because they had been trained to believe that fluoridation was safe and effective. But after rigorous review, they reversed their position. The scientific evidence for risk of harm to children from water fluoridation is too great to allow its continued addition to Madison water. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Narath.
Okay. I can do Dr. John Bailey again.
Looks like John left and is attempting to come back in.
Okay.
Let's give it a try.
I know sometimes that works for me.
Okay, John, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Right there, now you're on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am a practicing general dentist in West Melbourne, Florida. I have also served as an elected member of the West Melbourne City Council. I hold a college degree in chemistry from West Virginia University. I understand dentistry. I understand chemistry. I also understand how various issues appear and must be considered by local governments. Please consider that every local dentist who appears before you has a direct financial interest in water fluoridation, and removing fluoride from the water treatment system will directly benefit them financially. Despite this fact, I expect that the vast majority of the dentists who appear before you will ask you not to discontinue water fluoridation. Fluoride is a well-proven agent to decrease the susceptibility of teeth to dental decay. Water fluoridation is the most effective and far and away the cheapest way to provide this protection. Regardless to any claims made here tonight, my professional opinion is that there are no scientifically valid studies that show ill effects when fluoride is properly administered to the generally healthy population via water treatment, and that there are many scientifically valid studies that show a dramatic drop in tooth decay when fluoride is present in drinking water. I have personally treated people from both fluoridated and non-fluoridated areas, and the difference is quite dramatic. And that's with 37 years of clinical experience. Please understand that I'm speaking tonight to advise you to continue to fluoridate the Madison water supply. Please also understand that if you withdraw fluoride from the Madison water supply, you will increase dental patient volume and you will increase the profitability of local dental practices. Do not do this. I request that any time awarded to me tonight that's remaining be awarded to Dr. Johnny Johnson, who is very knowledgeable on this topic and I believe is present at this meeting virtually. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. We're not going to be reallocating any speakers' time during the course of this listening session. Next up, Amy. Oops, you're muted.
Karen Spencer.
Karen, it looks like you're unmuted. You are unmuted on our end and in the Zoom app. You may be muted on your microphone. Chair, maybe we should come back to Karen.
All right, next team.
All right. Stephen Slott. We'll come back to Karen after Stephen.
There's no person by that name.
Rebecca Warnken.
No person by that name.
Susan Machete.
Okay, Susan,
Okay.
there you go.
Am I unmuted?
No,
Sure.
go ahead.
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, that's me. Well, I think that we need to maximize the cleanliness of our air, water, and food, and that we need. Can you hear me?
Yes, keep on going.
Yes, we can. The issue that you're having is you're playing the stream right now, which has a latency. So you'll want to just listen to the headset on the phone right now.
I'd like to see the unnecessary chemicals removed from our drinking water. Fluoride is the most electronegative element in the entire periodic table, and that's extreme electronegativity causes the fluoride to rapidly interact chemically with electropositive metals and pull them along, particularly lead. And in this way, lead is what's being removed from our metal pipes during transit in the water distribution system. And that's what's causing us to have lead in our water, too. We need those unnecessary chemicals removed from our water for the best public health so that we do not have lead in our water as well as fluoride. And brain damage is an unacceptable trade-off for a benefit of decreased tooth decay based on the latest court thing. The scientific lab research has identified that fluoride is accumulating in brain regions that impact learning, memory, and alters proteins and neurotransmitters in the central nervous system. Water fluoridation harms the IQ points and is associated with other types of brain injuries, particularly in pregnant women and children. And Dr. Philip Brangin, the Danish neurotoxicologist who wrote the book Only One Chance, it warns us about the severity of the dangers of neurotoxin exposures in early fetal development and the great need to prevent early exposures to avoid decreased quality of life for that individual's lifetime and the society around them. And he's worked on fluoride studies since the 1980s at Mount Sinai in New York. And he published a meta-analysis of 27 fluoride studies, 26 of 27 found increased harm. So I ask you to remove fluoride from the water. And if you absolutely must put fluoride in our water, at least go to the pharmaceutical grade sodium fluoride and spend the money to keep all of these heavy metals out of it. And, but I would prefer no fluoride, but I find what you're putting in there to be unacceptable. It's unacceptable to use something that has got heavy metal contaminated industrial grade fluoride byproduct from the phosphate mining industry that when it goes downstream, it kills or cripples animals, cattle, people, and orange groves in Florida. If you drop it on the ground, it makes holes in the ground. If you put it in lakes and in the streams, it kills the fish.
Ms. Machete, your time's up. Hey, who's next?
Okay. Let's go back to Karen Spencer.
Okay, Karen, you should have a prompt up that you click on to unmute. There should be a prompt up there. Karen, you're unmuted on our end. You may have a prompt that's hidden behind a window or something like that. If you can find that, click that to unmute yourself. It looks like maybe we should come back to Karen.
Okay.
So the last registered speaker I have is Keith Decker.
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. So should I begin there?
Yes.
There are a lot of different angles you can approach this topic with, and a lot of details to dive into. To see my full presentation, along with links to studies and more information, please go to greenbaywater.org. To put it simply, though, the bottom line is this. Public water fluoridation is unethical, unsafe, and unnecessary because it is intentionally, as in the entire purpose of it, is to be a forced mass medication, violating an individual's right to consent and disregarding individual appropriate dosage. That alone is reason enough to stand in opposition to fluoridation. It should not be the role of government to force innocent people to ingest a medication against their will. No one should do that. Fluoride is not a benign substance. It's not a nutrient. It's not used to treat water quality. It's not merely the adjustment of a natural mineral. It's not calcium fluoride. It is fluorosilicic acid, an industrial toxic waste chemical from aluminum and fertilizer manufacturing, contaminated with lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, and other metals. It's used as a prophylactic drug intended to medicate children, indiscriminately applied to everyone in the community. Consider that if a citizen forced a politician to take a medication against their will like this, they'd be in jail because it is inherently a violation of a person's body, and it's obviously wrong to act as if one owns the body of another person, much less the entire population. That's why this is not merely a judgment call concerning the discernment of science involved. It is a matter of peaceful coexistence in respecting each other's innate human rights. If there's anything a person can rightly own, it's themselves. The sanctity of one's own body is why rape is wrong. Self-ownership and free will are something sacred to each conscious living being. This is why fluoridation contravenes multiple major codes of ethics and law. The very first sentence of the Nuremberg Code is the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. In UNESCO's Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, it explicitly states, in no case should a collective community agreement or the consent of a community leader or other authority substitute for an individual's informed consent. To circumvent that is a moral crime. Fluoride added to public water cannot be avoided, as it cannot be feasibly filtered out and it goes anywhere the water flows. If there's anything a person is entitled to, it's elemental sustenance. Water is a vital necessity of life, and it needs to be available free from drugs. It is not an appropriate way to treat a disease. You cannot control individual dosage to avoid harm. There is no informed consent, and there is no way to opt out. It is simply wrong for the government to force a mass medication on the public. With all the vulnerable groups ranging from babies to people with a compromised thyroid or kidney, you can be certain that someone, at least somebody out there, is going to be hurt by fluoridation. First priority.
Thank you. That's 3 minutes.
All right.
Okay. Karen Spencer. Maybe third time's the charm.
Yeah, Karen, you are unmuted on the Zoom app on both ends.
Maybe at this point I can roll through the other registrants that did not wish to speak, and then if Karen's sound works, Karen can interrupt. Does that work?
Yeah, Karen, it's probably a mute function on your microphone or your headset.
And then at this time too, I guess facilitators, if there's anyone else that missed their cue as I go through the rest of it. So the following individuals registered as available to answer questions but did not wish to speak. Kevin Knutson. And I'll say if they registered to support or oppose, but I did get inquiries from people who weren't really sure exactly how to answer that question on the registration form. So just bear in mind that that was a confusing thing. But Kevin Knutson registered in support. Antonina Capuro in support. Susanna Mickelson, support. Daniel Gerdes, support. Becca Matusevich, support. David Clemens, oppose. Tamim Seafree, support. Jan Miller, neither support nor oppose. Christine Farrell, support. Catherine Brum, support. David Clemens, support. Marie Krusco, support. And the following individuals registered but did not wish to speak. Ben Narad, support. Beth Hansen, support. Erica Valdez, representing the Wisconsin Dental Association, support. Lori Veerman, support. Ruth Elmendorf, support. Martin Challenger, DDS, support. Emma Sawija, support. Aaron Pfeiffer, support. Thomas Ganshert, support. Jason Vandehar, support. Thane B. Anderson, support. Matt Agnew, support. Elizabeth Wagner, support. Shruthri Dayal, support. Dr. Robert Paulin, oppose, representing University Square Dental Associates. Catherine Schuler, support. Julia Olson, support. Rebecca Cho, support. Douglas Ferris, support. Stacy Nemmer, representing More Smiles Wisconsin Incorporated, support. Jared Holdridge, support. Amitaj Karmavi, support. Ella Welsh, support. David Kenyon, support. Jacob Cohn, support. Annette Siebold, support. Kelly Kling, support. Jesse Grotelushin, support. Laura Rose, support. Geraldine Koosman, support. Roland Wilson, DDS, support. Malik Mbaya, support. Meg Atwood, support. Michelle Fox, support. Deb Backus, oppose. Julie Sheff, support. Aaron Wasik, support. Robin Hemmerly, support. Jennifer, support. Emily Melstrom, support. Sue Melstrom, support. Ryan Melstrom, support. Steve Melstrom, support. Summer Macias, representing the Alabama Department of Public Health Oral Health Office, support. Christine Bruseth, support. Rebecca Van Horn, RDH, support. Deanna McKinney, support. Anchor Jolly, support. Corinne Jolly, support. Jeanette Robinson, oppose. Mary Gernand, oppose. Charlene Kizier, support. Janelle Osborne Henkel, support. Lindsay Rosendahl, support. Signe Klotz, support. Morgan Towell, support. Bruce W. Austin, support. Michelle Krell, support. Regina Vitiver, support. Sherry Kiefer, support. Sarah Doty, support. Kimberly J. Payne, support. Curtis Henderson, support. John R. Moser, support. Chelsea Fossey, support. Brian D. Watkins, support. Elizabeth R. Friend, support. Tara Buddha, support. Rhonda Stevens, support. Tanya Ponick, support. Jennifer Leto, support. Amrita Tembe, support. Brittany Bowen, support. Sarah Peterson, support. Amanda Baggin, support. Mark Gustafson, support. Phil Latham, support. Ryan Silvola, support. Lauren Brower, support. Matt Coots, DDS, support. Jason Witt, support. Mike Gifford, support. Stephen Segal, DDS, MS, support. Molly Atau, support. Michael Grody, support. William F. Bird, support. Jessica Melby, support. Ross Toigo, support. Sarah McDermott, support. Laura Tills, support. Courtney Mann, support. Kelsey Hostetler, DDS, support. Fred Jager, support. Jessica Trauger, support. Otis Christensen, support. Ivan Christensen, support. Stephen Kellogg, support. Megan Abel, support. Dale Grimm, support. Gregory Casalone, DDS, support. Kendra Schaefer, support. Betsy Newhouse Hannah, support. Nicole Hinsman, support. Sharon Hinsman, support. Chad Campanelli, support. Thomas Wenham, support. Tammy Mandrino, support. Marissa Volker, support. Beth Wyatt, support. Janelle C. Ekdahl, support. Kelly Archambault, support. Misty Robertson, support. Amma Boateng, support. Sarah Lindberg, support. Brittany Breeze, support. Virgil M. Smiley, support. Laura Leichtenberg, support. Michael Spiewak, support. Peggy Spiewak, support. Catherine Giswold, support. Tom Goebel, support. Gwendolyn Sulentrup, support. Brad Hartjes, support. Lisa Young, support. Ivo Rosendahl, support. Audra Long, support. Adriana Jaramillo, support. Christopher Okunseri, support. Dingbo Zhao, support. Hugo Chavez, support. Christine Farrell, support. Sarah Dean, support. Christopher Bones, support. Dr. Cliff Hartman, representing the Wisconsin Dental Association, support. Kirsten Frobaum, support. Jessica Sickler, oppose. Gwen Sulentrup, support. Lynn Cotter, support. Anthony Farrell, support. Brian Ellingbo, support. Ezra Menon, support. Jerry McCombs, support.
And that's a complete roll, Amy, of people who...
Let me just double check. I think there was one in the general public comment that was put in the wrong spot. So let me just pull up that one quick. Sarbjeet Singh, registered in support, is available to answer questions. And Matt Zaborowski, registered in support and did not wish to speak. And that is everyone.
We still have Karen Spencer on the line.
All right, Karen, have you on the phone? If you can press stars.
Yeah.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes. Finally.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm having browser issues. All right. In 2018, I co-authored a peer-reviewed item on this topic, which was published in a science journal with Dr. Heidi Lineback, who is a dentist researcher, dentist, and recently retired head of preventive dentistry at the University of Toronto. I became involved in fluoridation in 2015 because after decades of suffering with arthritis, irritable bowel syndrome, and intermittent kidney and liver illnesses, any one of which could have killed me, I discovered it was my optimally fluoridated city water that was causing my illnesses. As an analyst and project manager, I dug into the research and discovered that approximately 15% of the population, like me, has a low tolerance to fluoride. I want to emphasize this is not an allergy because fluoride is a poison. You can't be allergic to a poison. It is a matter of tolerance. And 1 in 7 consumers, like me, will suffer for decades with misdiagnoses because of fluoride poisoning. I read the Dane Board of Health letter and checked their references. Those references did not support the statements made by the Board of Health. In particular, let me point to the thyroid references, one of which recommended fluoride in water be less than 0.5 parts per million in order to protect thyroid health. Man involved with naturally occurring calcium fluoride at below 0.3 parts per million. We artificially fluoride with sodium fluoride at 0.7 parts per million. More and more dentists, pediatricians, thyroid doctors, neuroscientists, and kidney doctors are counseling their patients to avoid fluoridated water based on 21st century science, as more and more organizations are backing away from fluoridation endorsements, again, based on modern science of harm. Just this past July, the editorial in Public Health Nursing Journal advised paying attention to the modern science regarding the impact on the developing brains of infants and recommended women avoid fluoridated tap water while pregnant and in feeding their babies. Also in July 2020, the Journal of Pediatrics published an item advising the avoidance of all fluoridated products and water by women during pregnancy and by infants for the first 6 months of life. In August 2019, the editors of JAMA Pediatrics advised that pregnant women avoid fluoridated water based on the high-quality NIH-sponsored scientific evidence out of Canada that children had a heightened risk of learning disabilities and significantly lower IQs as compared to those living in non-fluoridated communities. Now is not the time to rubber stamp a 1950s narrative, repeat dishonest talking points, and accept carelessly written letters that are not supported by their own references. Neither is it time to pretend poisoning people should be decided based on a straw poll of politically motivated advocates. Fluoride poisons consumers from womb to tomb. As water worker Brenda Stauden,
thank you, Ms. Spencer.
Turn off the fluoridation pump. Thank you.
So we've heard from all of our public speakers. Everybody who's registered to speak has now spoken. Amy, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
There are still some on the line available to answer answer questions if the board has questions. So.
I guess from my, I'd suggest that we have some discussion now. It's apparent that there is emerging science associated with fluoride neurotoxicity, and there are people who are concerned with public health on both sides of this, who have strong feelings. I guess, Doug, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I'm sure you've had all kinds of thoughts during the course of this discussion. Is there anything you'd like to say that would help illuminate this a little bit more? We've heard from so many people from out of town and out of the state. I'm really interested in what you all would have to say.
Well, sure. I would just stand by the statement that we have reviewed and looked at. As you know, we are in the midst of a pandemic, but I did pull Jeff Lafferty out of case investigations to really give this a thorough review, look at the new studies that were referenced. He did look at the studies. He's an environmental epidemiologist that did a literature review across the board, looked at all of the more recent studies on IQ. You also heard a lot of people that are talking about the additives and fluoride. He discusses that in the policy. And then just based on the review again, and the inequities that we see in the number of dental issues in our community and disparities in our health, it's our recommendation that the water utility continue to provide fluoride in our drinking water.
I see that we have Dr. Lafferty on the phone here as well. Would you like to say anything?
I think I would just support what Doug said. So this is a living document. We update it pretty frequently, like once every couple of years, or if we get any inquiries that are not covered or there's new science that people are concerned about, we try to include that as well. So this is the first version. This was 2008. And so it's been updated multiple times. So we call it a living document. And so as far as the IQ studies, I mean, those were reviewed, and majority of them are observational studies, and many of them do not include or do not thoroughly include social determinants of health. And many of these social determinants of health are known to impact school performance, impact IQ by themselves. So it's really hard to tease out, is it fluoride, is it the social determinants of health, when you don't adequately control for the social determinants of health. And that's probably the biggest concern about many of these studies. And I think it's an important point that one of the persons earlier mentioned the Grandjean et al. Study, which was a meta-analysis. I think it's important to point out that the control group, which was the group that they measured high fluoride exposures to, the control group, that level was pretty much on target with our level 4 community water fluoridation. That was their control group. So when someone says, yes, we had a lower IQ of 7 points in the Grandjean study, that was levels we're not putting in the water, not even near that. So the control group for that meta-analysis was levels equal to what we put into water fluoridation. And that's a really important point to make. And yeah, so I'll just stop with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Alder Rummel has her hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Please go ahead, Marcia. Oops.
Thank you. I didn't even know about unmuting myself and I forgot. I was just wondering if we could still ask some of the registrants questions if they're still available. Like I was very much, part of my curiosity got sparked by the lawsuit with the EPA, and we have at least one of the litigants still, I think, on the line, Mr. Nidal, and I'm wondering if I could ask him a little bit more about what's coming up, where are they at, what were some of the questions that the judge was asking, because I've seen some journalistic articles, but I'd just like to hear a little more if he's still
certainly
possible.
I don't believe, could you say the name again?
Christopher Nidal?
Oh yeah, there we go.
Did you hear my question? Oh, he's not ready yet, is he?
Christopher, if you're there, you are unmuted on our side. You should have a prompt on your end to unmute yourself. Christopher, are you there? Maybe we can go back.
If he's unable to come up, I saw that Lauren Kinnear had her hand raised as well.
I have a question for staff.
And I don't know. I just like expressing
Oops. Marcia, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? We're having some problems with you, Lauren.
Lauren's background is taking over her.
It is. Sorry about that, guys.
And the Zoom that we all learned to love. Maybe Dr. Lafferty. So we have this 7 parts per million. And some of the stuff I've been reading, there's questioning like, how did we come up with that amount? I mean, what data is there to say that's the right amount? What's the rationale for that amount?
That was recommended by the US EPA.
Yeah, but I mean, how did they come to that? You have a top of the head answer, like why that amount and what was used as a basis for making that recommendation?
I'd have to go back and review that, but I know it was, they used modeling, and it was a literature review with modeling to come across that level. So I'd have to dig more into that specific question for you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure I have other questions, but I will let Lauren take her time.
Go ahead,
Thanks.
Lauren.
Am I up? All right, thank you. This actually is Mr. Lafferty too. The question being, we've settled on the amount that we put in right now. Is there any discussion at the level of EPA or elsewhere in the scientific/health community that's talking about the value of lower levels? Sometimes we inch our way towards change as opposed to leaping into it. Can you address that, the number itself?
Well, the 0.7 level that we have now was an adjustment to account for more availability of toothpaste because it used to be 1 part per million. And so the 0.7 is actually a lower to better account for the other fluoride products that are available.
And there's no value to moving it to 0.6, 0.7, 0.4 because it's really just random guessing at that point?
It's not random guessing. That's what's considered the optimal level. But as science moves forward, maybe that optimal level will be a 0.5 or a 0.6, but the optimal level from science right now is considered 0.7.
Okay, and there's no one looking at other levels in particular?
Not that I'm aware of, but that would probably be a better question answered by the US EPA themselves, because I'm not aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Just for a little perspective, I looked up the MCL for fluoride, and it's the maximum contaminant level for fluoride in drinking water supplies, and that's still at 4 milligrams per liter. I'm not sure if that's the same as the Wisconsin standard for fluoride. Doug, do you know just offhand whether what the enforcement standard is for fluoride in Wisconsin water, or if there is a standard?
Joe Grandy has his hand up.
I don't know that.
Yeah. There we go. Joe, there you are. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so that is the drinking water standard in the state of Wisconsin, 4 milligrams per liter. So, and that's based on health and safety. That's the health and safety for drinking water.
So usually in the development of MCLs, they're based on human and animal studies and the like a standard full-on toxicological evaluation. Do either you, Joe, or you, Doug, or Dr. Lafferty know whether there's a move to revisit the MCL for fluoride?
I'm not aware of anything currently planned for an additional review of that MCL.
I agree with Joe. I'm also not aware of that.
Okay.
Not either.
Thanks.
This is Chris Nidell. I'm sorry, I got a message that you guys were looking to ask a question.
Yes, hi. Thank you for finding us again. I asked that I said I was interested in the litigation that you referenced with the EPA, and we were just talking now about the standards for the EPA. And I'm just wondering if you could just give us a little bit of background about where that lawsuit is at, what's coming up. I think one of the speakers, Dr. Neary, talked about some future report. I wasn't sure that was related to the lawsuit, but just tell us a little bit more about what's going on with your litigation around fluoride and the EPA.
Sure, and I did hear you guys discussing the MCL. There's been some push at the EPA Office of Water to have that MCL reconsidered, given the fact that even the recommended levels are well below the 4 part per million MCL, and that MCL was not determined based on neurotoxic effects, which may occur at lower levels, but rather primarily on fluorosis, and even that being primarily skeletal fluorosis. So that MCL is outdated and is sort of belied by the evidence, even the evidence of increasing levels of fluorosis in the population. As far as the lawsuit goes, the lawsuit is in sort of a strange state of limbo. Primarily, I would say for procedural reasons. When we finished our trial, the judge concluded, and this is on the record in the court transcript, that fluoride was in fact a neurotoxin, that the evidence he believed established that fluoride was a neurotoxin. There are a number of procedural issues that give the judge some pause, I believe, and I don't like to speak, I wouldn't want to talk to a reporter about a pending litigation, but for your purposes, I think there are some decisions that were made by the court, including the allowance of evidence between the petition time. So the petition was filed years ago, and as you all have heard, there are some recent studies on this issue that are some of the best and most powerful studies. And the court had agreed to allow that evidence in, which I think makes practical sense given the fact that we would spend 3 or 4 years litigating on science that was outdated and then only answer a question that was based on 3 or 4 year old science. So he had agreed to allow that, and what he has suggested to the plaintiffs is that we file a new petition. Presumably EPA would deny that petition. We would file another lawsuit, and that lawsuit would be combined with this lawsuit in front of the same judge, and therefore the judge would have that procedural determination sort of wrapped up so that it would not be subject to appeal, or it would not be subject to being overturned on appeal. And then there's another issue related to standing, which is purely a procedural issue as far as who are the right plaintiffs to bring suit. And the court had some concern about what was in the standing affidavits for the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. And I think what he wanted to see was more emphasis on the pregnancy, the critical window of pregnancy as being the timing of exposure where there's the greatest concern. And basically he wanted us to have pregnant or childbearing plaintiffs to sort of shore up the issue of standing. So it's on hold. No one has won or lost, but the judge has made some findings on the record, including the fact that fluoride is neurotoxic. And the only question that he left remaining on that front was whether it was neurotoxic at levels that are comparable to where fluoride is added in the drinking water in the U.S. And I would also point out, since you guys were talking about the MCL, the court focused on the 0.7, the 0.7 ppm. However, as you all were just discussing, fluoride occurs in the U.S. Either naturally or through community water fluoridation up to 4 parts per million. So if there's a question about neurotoxicity at 0.7, where there is strong evidence at say 1 or 1.2, we certainly know that that's well within the range that's acceptable according to the EPA's MCL.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there's questions I should ask. I'm just still learning, so I don't know any. You talked about the gender effects that other toxicants, I think you called them, also have gender effects. Because at some point, the fact that it was one showing exhibiting in boys and not girls just created a lot of dismissive comments in this among some reviewers.
That is correct. And, I will say, and I don't want to exceed the bounds of your questions, but there were so many people that came in to argue that the anti-fluoride position or the concerns about fluoride were based on pseudoscience or junk science and pure emotion, which those same people went on to bring up anecdotal evidence of their 3 kids and they look in the mouths and they can tell where these kids grew up, which, clearly is not scientific. On this issue of what I've been corrected by my experts to call it a sexual differentiation because gender is something other than sex. So we'll call it what's called a sexual dimorphism, which is what we see in some exposures, and we see this with chemical exposures like benzene, and we also see this with drug exposures. So I've done a lot of work and I have some litigation on the exposures of infants and the neurodevelopmental effects to antidepressants. So when male children are exposed in the womb, they suffer neurodevelopmental damage, which manifests in ways that are diagnosed as autism. So there's brain damage that occurs from excess serotonin levels in the womb that changes the brain's development in ways that these children end up being diagnosed with autism. Those same studies show that effect is not seen either to the same degree or at all in females. And the theory is that the female placenta has a protective effect for some of these early environmental exposures, particularly on neurodevelopment. And we see that, the interesting thing is we see that both in human studies and in animal studies. So when they expose the rats to the same exposure, they see the same male versus female gender effect, or sexual effect.
Thank you. It's probably in the weeds more than we need to go, but my last question is, and you didn't mention this and somebody else did, but I bet you might know, the report coming in the fall, the NTP, that's what I wrote down. Is that
correct?
What is that?
The national
recommended we wait till that comes out, and what would we learn from that report?
So the National Toxicology Program is doing an assessment of the neurotoxicity, the evidence of neurotoxicity of fluoride. They did an assessment of the animal evidence of neurotoxicity, and they found what they call limited evidence and I think adequate evidence for different measures of neurotoxicity from the animal studies. And what that phrase means is limited evidence doesn't mean the evidence is, it just means that there's not a lot of evidence, right? So it's not a question of whether the evidence, it's more a question of strength of the evidence rather than strength of the neurotoxic effects. But they are now engaged in a review of the human data. They published a draft of that, and they are about to publish another draft of that. And that's one of the additional things that the court would like to see, given the fact that NTP is the nation's toxicology, nation's toxicologist, and that they are looking at this issue. I think the court would like to hear from the nation's toxicologists on this issue. And in their original draft, they indicate that there is evidence of neurotoxicity. We expect that this upcoming draft will be consistent with the first draft that came out, and I don't expect the final will be, a final version will be issued probably not until next year, but there is expected a new draft to come out sometime in the fall.
Great, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, thanks, sorry for all the back and forth trying to get a hold of me.
That's all I have for this person. I yield my time.
Yes, Pat.
Gene, I appreciate everyone's comments. I would like to make a motion, if I could.
Yeah.
I move that we retain the Water Utility Board fluoridation policy EL2A.
So, fair enough. And so you want to vote at this time to retain the policy. I'm not sure what to do quite procedurally. I'd like to.
It just asks, is there a second?
Is there a second?
Even if it's just for discussion purposes.
Is there a second for
any purpose? But
for any purpose?
Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
Thanks, Lauren. So
now it's up for discussion.
Great. Does anyone have a discussion to raise? Yeah, go ahead, Marcia. Oops.
I might be able to support or not. I just not sure that's where I want to start. I thought we would. I think there was maybe an email earlier from the chair about maybe asking the advisory board to look at some of this stuff, and I was kind of hoping that we would have a little bit more process before we decided. I mean, at some point, maybe there's not a case to be made not to do it, but I think there's enough questions that, at least for me, there are. Thanks.
Fair enough. Thank you. And as far as that goes, we've heard information on both sides of this issue, and I would like to hear from our technical advisory committee. I think that we've heard from a whole bunch of experts on either side of this issue who have their own strong opinions about this, but I don't think that we've made full use of the resources that we have at hand. And I would want to have input from the technical advisory committee before trying to make a decision about whether or not to retain this policy. Yep, go ahead, Pat.
I think that if we examine the number of people speaking in support, it's an overwhelming amount of folks expressing that support. I'm also convinced by the science as presented by our Board of Health, by some of the people that we have on staff, that it is a safe and I believe the preponderance of evidence does support keeping the fluoridation policy.
Mike Daly's had his hand up.
Oh, thank you. Mike.
Thank you. We heard a lot of good technical information from both sides, and I don't know that I can make a decision. I found both sides very compelling. But what I would like to hear more discussion on was maybe call it the libertarian argument that we are forcing this on our entire customer base, whether they're willing or even knowingly getting it. And I'm more troubled by that than either of the technical issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Discussion on the libertarian side. Lauren. Oops, you're still.
Yeah, I don't have a response to that particular aspect of the discussion, but I did want to know if we could break in for a moment and ask Joe Grande what an appropriate process might be for the TAC to take a look at this particular issue and provide us with some additional insight or advice. I know they just met or they're just about to meet. Would that be a many months long examination? Would it be a one meeting type of thing? How long would it take to get some information back to us that might further inform the discussion?
I would hope that I would get some direction from the board or the general manager in terms of exactly what it was that you want. So I've already heard a desire to have more technical information evaluated. I've also heard kind of looking at that libertarian viewpoint. I don't know that libertarian viewpoint is something that we necessarily be the experts on that. I would reference that we did have one of the people that did speak earlier tonight did mention that Henry Anderson, the former chief medical officer for the state of Wisconsin, does serve on that board. I do know that there are folks on the advisory board that felt that that would be a very valuable discussion to have. I think that point that was raised about the NTP report is a valid one. And it sounds like the timing of that is maybe not later this year. And so I would feel like I would need some additional guidance in terms of what questions the board has that they would like to have addressed by the technical advisory committee.
Certainly. Lauren. Oops.
That's okay. Yeah. Who gets the mute button first is the name of this game, right? So I'm toying with an amendment here to the motion that would ask the counsel or advice of our technical advisory committee when that other report is available, which functionally would mean that we would keep our policy in play as it stands right now, making no changes. But when the TAC came back with its deliberations and its conclusions, and I would argue for a conclusion of some sort that came from that body, also taking into waiting for that report. If it's early next year, then we're not going to have anything until we would look at this again. So I'm toying with making an amendment that allows us to close the issue for tonight, continue as we are until we get that next bit of information and advice from our TAC. So that is an amendment which would need a second then.
Marcia, you've had your hand up.
I would second, although I think Patrick was seconding, which but I did kind of have some, I'm not sure I understand fully what the technical advisory board can help all the questions I have. So I'll just say more of what I have and people can tell me, whether that's their purview or not. But the thing that keeps striking me is we started this whole process of fluoridation well before it was pervasive in every single dental product. And how do we weigh the difference between a topical process and one that is like the universal, as Mr. Dale is saying, for all the customers. And so, how do you weigh that? And because it's not like, in my opinion, like we heard a lot of stories, anecdotal about kids, especially kids maybe who without a lot of resources of insurance, have more dental issues. And the answer to me isn't fluoride in the water or not fluoride in the water. It seems to me it's dental programs in schools or, free dental insurance for, eligible low-income families, things like that would be more direct and more helpful than this kind of universal solution that is arguably not, you can't prove that it did anything good. It might not have done anything bad, but you don't know that it did anything good exactly. So I don't know if that's something they can answer. But that would be something I'm interested in.
Pat, go ahead.
I would be willing to withdraw my motion and support the amendment. And now I would suggest that I'm supporting Lauren's amendment as a motion that I would be willing to support.
I appreciate that, Pat. So where do we sit? Lauren, you've made a motion to refer this to a later date after our decision to a later date after we've gotten some feedback from our technical advisory committee?
I think that's functionally what happens now. Is the motion is to continue the fluoridation policy as it stands now, referring the matter to our technical advisory committee, commission, whatever it is. And what is the full name of the report that we're waiting that might come at the beginning of the year that Mr. Grandi referenced?
It's the National Toxicology Programs Review of Neurotoxicity of fluoride in humans.
Right, that's it. I think NTP, people will go, what is that after a while? So if that could be in the motion itself, which functionally means for us that we will not have an answer for this until potentially, mid next year, spring, perhaps summer of next year. And if we get a second for that, unless you consider that we already have it, I can share why I think this is the proper path for us to follow at this time.
I sort of got a second from Alder Rummel, so I'm proceeding with it amended. Yeah.
Okay. All right. With that, if I could just speak on it, this is, once again, every time that we review this issue, I think we all learn a little bit more by courtesy of the people that come and share their information with us and courtesy of the ever-moving field of science and, water quality. So I think that to wait potentially 9 months is not a very long time for us to gather more information. We are a board that likes to evaluate all viewpoints, libertarian, scientific, public health, etc. And we would be well served by waiting for such an august group as the National Toxicology Program to weigh in on this. As professional scientists, I rely much more on them and our local scientists than I do on generalists in our community, myself included. And I think that would be very valuable information for us to have. I would hate to make a premature decision and have our community suffer consequences from it.
I'd just like to, Deb, please go ahead.
Okay. I'd just like to say that this is all new to me. So I have been reading all the comments, taking notes on all of this and reading everything I can. But so I would feel comfortable with the motion that we have before us, which is to continue and get more information. I wouldn't feel comfortable with making a major change tonight, like to discontinue what we're doing based on what we have from our own, city experts. So I just think if we continue doing what we're doing with an open mind, knowing that there's more information coming, and there is this NTP report, and again, this is all new to me, that I think, and waiting for the Water Quality Advisory Group or whatever their official name is, I think it seems like a prudent course of action.
Thanks, Deb. Mike.
Lauren, were you putting a definite date on the return to revisit this, or a definite event that it's tied to?
Yes, and that would be the release of the NTP report, the National Toxicology Program report, and giving our advisory committee at least one meeting, perhaps two. So it's it's tied to events, release of the report and the opportunity, assuming that our technical advisory committee takes it up as quickly as possible following its publication.
Thanks,
how's
Lauren.
that for weenie?
Marcia? Oops.
Thank you. I support the motion, but I just want to thank everyone. I didn't know that how many people registered, Amy, that you read their names. That was several hundred, I think. That something that, would draw so much attention around the country. And now I know more because I see that there's movement around the country on this issue, and we're just a small part of that bigger questioning. So, but I do appreciate everyone showing up and sharing their expertise and knowledge. And part of me as an alder wishes they'd show up for everything in such large numbers, because, it always helps public policy when people pay attention. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marcia. I guess I'd like to just offer a little perspective from my point of view in my professional life working as a hydrogeologist. This feels a little bit to me like the change in the maximum contaminant level for arsenic from a few years back. It was probably 15 years back, 20 years back. It changed from 50 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion because earlier the MCL was based on a treatment standard, and it was changed to 10 micrograms per liter based on toxicology. So anyway, the idea that these standards would evolve is even though it doesn't happen all the time, and it doesn't happen quickly, it does. These standards do change as more information comes in and as technologies change. So it's and many of the speakers today, we're talking about new information coming in, and I think we should take the opportunity to let the process work itself a little bit more and make more use of our resources, such as the Technical Advisory Committee. Marcia, did you have some more? Oh, okay. Is there any further discussion on this topic for this evening amongst the board members?
I can share the motion as I have it at the moment. Right. It's not verbatim, but
that's good.
Okay. I have a motion made by Kinnair, seconded by Rummel, to keep the policy as it is now and request that the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee provide a recommendation to the board after the NTP report, which I'll get the full name from Joe and spell it all out, is available.
And I believe that this is in draft, and a new draft is going to come out. I don't believe it's in a report.
Okay, so
because that may be much farther out into the future.
So a new draft of the. Can I unmute Joe for a second?
Yes.
Just to get this language right. Joe, how would you phrase this?
I don't know what that process is, if that's a new draft or the final report. What I got sense is that there will be a new draft, and then that would be the information that we would be using. And then what I thought is there could be up to 1 or 2 meetings of the Technical Advisory Committee to review that. That's what I heard.
And I heard from Lauren that Lauren wanted a recommendation from the committee
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, Lauren.
Thank you. Not to muddy waters, but this is a question for Mr. Grande. There's a first draft, there's a second draft. Should we wait for the final publication, in your scientific professional opinion? Knowing it might be a long way away.
I would want a final draft. That would be my own personal and professional opinion, but that could be quite a ways off. And
right. Like years off?
Well, you know how slowly things work through the media, right? And it's not like this is an issue without controversy and without strong opinions on both sides. So,
do you think the next draft is sufficient for the body to work with?
I think it's enough to at least have a sufficient review of some of this more current science that's out there. Certainly would be more updated science than what is currently in the MCL. I think Gene's making a very good point. And I think one of the speakers also did as well, is that MCL did not take into account this neurotoxicity. So the MCL is based on other factors. And I think that this new review, or the new report on this review, would share more of this, more of the latest science. So in a perfect world, I would want a final report before we're making some type of significant change. But I think that we will have some evidence that it will help to inform that potential recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm comfortable with this next released draft as being part of the motion.
That makes sense to me, although I'm a little bit troubled by Joe saying that we're not living in the perfect world.
Medicine's pretty perfect, but or close enough to perfect for me.
Thank you for your illuminating comments. Amy, do you want to read the motion back to us one more time, and then we can? It's been moved and seconded, I believe.
It has. So would you say it's after the next draft of the NTP report is available? Would that be a good? Okay. All right. So I'll read the whole thing then. A motion was made by Kinnair, seconded by Rummel, to keep the policy as it is now and request that the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee provide a recommendation to the board after the next draft of the NTP report is available. Does that work?
Yeah. So that's the motion before the board now?
Yes, if that's...
All right. Well, I'll
Lauren, is your hand up, or did I just not lower it?
She's muted too.
Oh, I just tried to...
I'll take my hand down.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry about that. That was me.
Okay.
All right. So is there a motion to refer our decision until after the additional information is available and we've heard from
the motion's already out there, so now it would just be if anyone objects to a unanimous vote, they could raise their hand at this point, and I'd do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Amy. As you had said, if anybody objects to this motion, please raise your hand. Otherwise, it will be unanimous. All right. Seeing no objections, this motion passes. And we'll refer this until more information is available. I really appreciate your fortitude, board members and other attendees, and staff members for hanging in with us for this 4-hour meeting. The board has other business, and we had, Amy, you and I had discussed calling for a second meeting to deal with our regularly scheduled business to talk about the budget.
Yes, I need to send that email to the board. Yes.
All right.
We'll do that.
So we'll send out an email. Amy will send out an email for us to have a meeting to discuss the budget issues and to go over the performance review of the GM and finally be done with that. So I'd like to have that meeting in a couple of weeks so that it would, because the budget issues are sort of time sensitive, and we may end up in a jackpot if we delay dealing with that issue. So as a concept, does that sound okay for you board members? Unless you want to hang in here for another couple hours. All right, great. So again, thanks everybody for hanging in there. Is there any more discussion on this issue, or are we comfortable adjourning for the evening? And I would say, is there, and failing further discussion, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Alder Rummel has seconded. Lawrence.
Troopers.
So the motion has been raised and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And it's unanimous. Thanks so much for hanging in here and keeping an open and stimulated and voluble mind for all of this. I really appreciate it.